Chapter 399. As soon as the words came out, many old disciples who had been shaken showed shame on their faces. They kowtowed to Hua Yan 3 times and fled. The remaining 30% of the disciples were reduced again, leaving less than 20%. Hua Yan looked at the more than 100 people who were left in the square, and felt a little relieved. If she were to put herself in their shoes, if she were to encounter such a crisis without knowing anything, she might not have stayed either. These 100 people were completely gambling with their lives. "Headmaster, why do you?" First elder sighed and believed that Hua Yan was going to disband the sect. Hua Yan smiled and suddenly felt something. She looked up at the sky and whispered, "Regardless of their talents, they will be the real core of Hua Jin's sect in the future." First elder was slightly stunned. Before he could respond, the cracking sound above his head was suddenly magnified. "Ha ha ha ha, Hua Yan, since you don't want to escape, then go to hell." Yu Wutao laughed wildly and punched at the center of the crack. The next moment, the light curtain broke like a mirror. The sky was full of flying fragments, reflecting the desperate faces of the disciples of Hua Jin's sect. Hua Yan's face turned cold. She flicked her sleeves and floated up. The universe ring between her fingers flashed with red light, and the blood-colored diamond stone, which had been repaired by Su Li, reappeared in her hand. Even if Su Li had said that this cup of bloodstone should not be used easily, she couldn't watch the remaining disciples of Hua Jin's sect die in vain. The 7th branch of Su family, who had been standing aside and watching coldly, felt frightened when they saw the blood-colored diamond stone in Hua Yan's hand. They were about to take action. Suddenly, whoosh! A flying sword shot over with terrifying power. Yu Wutao's face changed slightly, and he hurriedly stopped and took a step back. The flying sword happened to brush his face, run through him and Hua Yan, and stuck straight in the center of the empty square of Hua Jin's sect. Yu Wutao touched his face and looked gloomy when he saw his hands full of blood. "They are not friendly." Hua Yan put away the blood-colored diamond stone and breathed a sigh of relief. She looked at the nothingness where the flying sword came from with a smile on her face. Did they finally arrive? Ha! The Zihan sect and the Su family teamed up to bully a small sect. What an eye-opener. The sneer came from a distance. When Yu Wutao saw that the person was a scholar with a sallow face, he couldn't help but be shocked. After sensing that the latter's cultivation was only at Jindan realm, he was even more ashamed and angry. A junior in Jindan realm made him guard against him for a long time. If this matter was spread out, how could he live in Zihan sect? "Ignorant child, how dare you interfere in my affairs? Die for me." When Yan Zai saw Yu Wutao taking the initiative to rush over, his eyes brightened. Instead of retreating, he advanced, laughing and fighting with Yu Wutao. Immortal Bingshu. This. Hua Yan was also surprised to see the person. Yuling's sect had always wanted to unify the 3 sections. Seeing that Hua Jin's sect was lonely, they should be happy. Why did they suddenly show up to help? Before she could figure out the situation, another charming voice came from the horizon, and 2 people appeared in the sky. One was a seductive woman, and the other looked like a child. His entire body was snow-white, and his expression was cold. With a single glance, one could tell that the 2 of them were not simple characters. The pneuma of the 2 can't be guessed. Yuanying realm. When Su Lin, the head of the 7th branch of Su family, saw the people coming, his heart thumped, and he knew something was wrong. After thinking for a few seconds, he was about to step forward and clench his fists to test, but he saw that the 2 people in the air suddenly looked at him as if they were looking for prey. Then, without saying a word, they swooped down. "Oh no! Let's fight together." Su Lin looked stern, and immediately called the 2 elders in Yuanying realm of Su family to fight together. But at this moment, Snow Child's lips hummed, and a clear word "fix" echoed in the nothingness. What? I can't move. Su Lin's pupils shrank in horror, and he could only watch the two elders fight. But at this time, Xian Meiji took a string of bells from her waist and shook them gently. The bewitching jingle sounded in the ears of the two elders. The two elders of Su family had no power to resist. They stopped like puppets without energy supply, and let Xian Meiji and Snow Child hit their chests with their palms respectively. They vomited blood and flew backward. Run! You can't beat him. Su Lin was shocked. After struggling with all his strength for 3 seconds, he finally broke free from the spell of Snow Child. Without saying a word, he took the two elders to escape quickly, without looking at Yu Wutao. Just a very excellent daughter died. He had many children, and he could cultivate them again. He could never lose his life here. The old man ran away so fast. Xian Meiji, who couldn't catch up with him, pursed her mouth and said unhappily. Snow Child nodded and couldn't help but send a sound transmission. These 3 practitioners are too weak. They haven't even reached the level of Yuan. I don't know if our performance is qualified in her eyes. Hearing Snow Child mention this, the pride in Xian Meiji's eyes immediately disappeared, and was replaced with deep worry. Brother Yen is so lucky. That old guy can't run away. Snow Child turned to look at Yu Wutao, who was covered with blood and exhausted, and continued to send a sound transmission with envy. At this moment, Yu Wutao, who was mentioned by Snow Child, was indeed facing a life-and-death crisis, and the crisis came inexplicably, which made him confused. Boom! With the help of Yen Zai's palm force, Yu Wutao spat blood again. His face was pale, and he could finally spare energy to speak. Fellow practitioner, wait a minute. Forgive me for my stupidity. We have no hatred or resentment. Why do we have to fight to the death? Yen Zai shook off the blood on his flying sword, and with a smile on his sallow face, he replied, if I remember correctly, you were the one who wanted to take my life first. Since that's the case, why can't I kill you? Hearing this, Yu Wutao was so angry that he almost spat blood again. How could he know that the combat power of a practitioner in Jindan stage was even higher than his? He had no power to fight back in the hands of this person. It was terrible. After thinking quickly for a moment, seeing that Yen Zai was about to fight again, he hurriedly stopped him. He couldn't hide the panic in his voice. Fellow practitioner, why do you do this? I am willing to compensate you to appease your frightened heart. How about it? Swish! A sword flashed across his neck as fast as lightning. The expression on Yu Wutao's face froze immediately. After a moment, his head was separated from his body, and blood rushed to the sky. Phew! When the flying sword returned to his hand, Yen Zai casually put it into the universe ring, and said lightly, nothing. If he wasted any more time, the spiritual boat would arrive. If he hadn't solved everything by the time Su Li arrived, wouldn't he be very incompetent? Who are you pretending for? Xian Meiji rolled her eyes. Although Snow Child didn't speak, his eyes were twitching. In the Cave of Inheritance, why didn't he see that Yen Zai was so sultry? On the top of the main peak below, everyone, including Hua Yan, was at a loss. Except for Hua Yan's speculation in her heart, no one knew what had happened. Seeing that Yu Wutao was simply beheaded, First Elder felt cold on his neck. He looked at Yen Zai standing in the nothingness, and his eyes were full of horror. Amidst this strange and awkward atmosphere, a spirit boat covered in cuts and bruises finally sailed over slowly. Su Li, who had changed her face, stood at the bow of the boat and glanced at Yu Wutao's body on the ground. She flicked her fingers at Yen Zai, and a white light shot over. Yen Zai caught it subconsciously. He thought it would be the storage room for the reward, but he didn't expect it was just a jade slip, which didn't record any mental method, but a series of spiritual medicines with unfamiliar names. When he was wondering, Su Li's sound transmission sounded in his ear. When these things are collected, the damage to your foundation will be recovered. It's up to you. Hearing this, Yen Zai couldn't understand what it meant. He nodded fiercely while trembling slightly. How could he forget that this person's medical skills were absolutely at the level of a miracle-working doctor? How could a damage to the foundation be a problem for her? As for you two. Su Li turned her eyes and looked at Xian Meiji and Snow Child, who were staring at Yen Zai enviously. They immediately lowered their heads in shame. Su Li looked at the two poor children and couldn't get angry. Her cold words became a little gentle, "Don't do it again." Xian Meiji and Snow Child's dim eyes lit up at the same time, and they nodded in unison. Hua Yan was still in a daze and almost said Su Li's name. Then she was awakened by Su Li's eyes. She immediately reacted and said, "Grand Elder, they are." Su Li glanced at Bei Xiao Liang, who was completely petrified, and shook her head. "Let's talk about this later." Li Guang, who was still absent-minded, was suddenly awakened by such a call. He said respectfully, "I'm here." Su Li pointed to the remaining disciples of the sect. Now there are few disciples in the sect. Yuan Shu betrayed the sect, and Wang Yu has been executed by me. You are the only one who can take the position of Mount Head. Do you understand? What? Junior sister apprentice Wang is dead. Li Guang was shocked and didn't know whether to be happy or sad for a while. Bei Xiao Liang was very surprised. Wang Yu didn't show up for a long time, and he had long suspected that she had escaped. He didn't expect that she had been executed by Su Li. This couldn't be better. She plotted against me. She only has herself to blame. Su Li said and glanced at LV meaningfully. Then she said no more and called Yen Zai and others into the hall. Only First Elder and Bei Xiao Liang were still standing on the peak. Seeing the whole scene, First Elder was stunned for a long time. Then he murmured, "It turns out that our Huajian sect really has a Grand Elder." When Su Li walked away, he breathed a sigh of relief. He broke out in a cold sweat as if he had been fished out of the water. He couldn't see through Su Li, so he wanted to secretly use the secret method of Yushu's sect to find out the real cultivation of this woman, but he still didn't sense anything. Not only that, but he was clearly discovered by that glance just now. Fortunately, the little holy boy has an old relationship with this sect. Otherwise, he would have offended. He had a lingering fear. His strength was not much stronger than Yu Wutao's. With the protection of such a mysterious and powerful existence, even if all the members of Huajian sect die, it can definitely develop in a short time. The relationship between the little holy boy and this sect is absolutely beneficial and harmless. After the fear, he thought happily in his heart. He didn't notice the indescribable complexity in Bei Xiao Liang's eyes. Chapter 400. What happened next was much calmer. Li Guang went down the mountain to reorganize the remaining disciples. In fact, there was nothing to reorganize. Although Grand Elder didn't take action personally, they also saw that there were several old monsters of Yuanying realm among the strong men who surrendered to Grand Elder. Grand Elder must be more unfathomable. With such thoughts, all the remaining disciples were full of hope for the future. They didn't feel dispirited at all, and soon devoted themselves to the passion of rebuilding the new sect. Yen Zai stayed for a while and left. Yuling's sect was completely under his control. Since he decided to follow Su Li, he was no longer obsessed with the identity of a headmaster. After he went back to reorganize Yuling's sect, it could be incorporated into the new Huajian sect. Old Lady Duhua and Snow Child lived in Huajian sect, digesting the insights of the trip to Tsanglei's cave. At this moment, in the hall of the main peak, Hua Yan dismissed the resentful first elder, and couldn't wait to ask, "Where did you get so many seniors of Yuanying realm? If they are willing to join Huajian sect, as long as the number of our disciples reaches a certain level, we can definitely rush to the top sects in Zhezhou region, second only to the 25 sects." Su Li took a sip of the scented tea made by Hua Yan, and smiled deeply. "My purpose is not only to join the top sections." Hua Yan was slightly shocked, and blurted out, "What do you want to do?" Su Li shook her head. "It's too early to say now. As for those people, only Old Lady Duhua and Immortal Bingshu can stay, and the two juniors don't count." As she said, Su Li mentioned a little about the origins of Snow Child and Xian Meiji. Hua Yan was shocked and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was more curious about how Su Li subdued the two arrogant talents. "It's no use thinking too much. My plan. I don't have much confidence. You will know it in the future, so it doesn't make much sense to say it now. You take these to heal first, and I'll go to check the tactical matrix." After Su Li said that, she threw a universe ring and turned to leave. Hua Yan was stunned for a moment. She stopped thinking and scanned the universe ring with her divine awareness. She saw that there were 300 celestial stones in it in addition to the healing ammunition. Su Li went down the mountain alone and went to the square where the disciples of the sect were before. Star-stacked tactical matrix is broken. What is broken is not the matrix core, but the center of the transformation of Wacken and the power of the tactical matrix. She vaguely remembers that it was set somewhere in the square. At this moment, the square had become empty. All the disciples had been taken back by Li Guang to Fujian Peak to heal. Although they did not participate in the previous battle, they were also affected. With a light snap, Su Li landed on the ground. Her cold eyes glanced over and her psychic awareness spread out. Soon, she found the place and went to the right. When she reached the edge of the square, she gently waved her left hand. The next moment, a red light flashed, and a rusty central device suddenly appeared and fell into her hand. Putting away the hub, Su Li suddenly said to herself, "Come out." Bei Xiao Liang, who was beside one of the pillars on the edge of the square, appeared awkwardly. He didn't expect that he could hide from Su Li's detection. After scratching his head, he directly walked over and bowed, saying, "Disciple Bei Xiao Liang pays respect to Grand Elder." Now the doubts in his heart had been completely solved. When they were in the secret realm of shattered spirits, Su Li treated him differently. She must have recognized that he used to be a disciple of Huajian sect. Su Li turned around and looked at Bei Xiao Liang up and down. She nodded gently and said, "It seems that you didn't slack off after you went back. Grand Elder, you flatter me. My achievements are nothing." Bei Xiao Liang hurriedly replied, not daring to be arrogant. "You have a good understanding, so you don't need to belittle yourself." Su Li was speechless. She could see that Bei Xiao Liang's pneuma was smooth and flawless, and she seemed to have touched a trace of Taishu. After Yushu, it was Taishu. Yushu tactics was the famous practice method of Yushu sect, but the real Holy Sun and Holy Girl level task would be given the more ancient Taishu tactics. Yushu tactics was the simplified version of Taishu tactics. Only when Yushu tactics reached the consummation could it be possible to practice Taishu tactics. Thinking of this, Su Li looked up and seemed to see through everything. She saw he who was healing on Fujian Peak. The personal protection of a Yuanying realm is not something that my master can decide. It seems that this boy will be taught Taishu tactics soon, so I don't need to teach him privately to avoid trouble. Thinking of this, Su Li took out a carrier rune and handed it to Bei Xiao Liang. There was a trace of gentleness on her calm face. "You should know what to do. If you are wronged in Yushu sect, come back. Bei Xiaoliang took over the carrier rune as if he had received a treasure. He responded with tears in his eyes, "I understand." A few days later, Bei Xiaoliang left. With Su Li's words, he left with peace of mind. A few days later, Yan Zai merged the whole Yuling sect into Huajian sect. The number of people in the two sects was very different, and it was quite difficult to get along. Hua Yan soon came to Su Li and said with a smile, "Now, whether it is called Huajian sect or Yuling sect, some people are dissatisfied. You are the grand elder of our sect. Why don't you give the sect a new name?" "Anyway, I named Huajian sect casually. It's good for you to change it." "Should I?" Su Li opened her eyes, thought for a moment, and said softly, "Let's name it Ni." The trajectory of her life was nothing more than going against the current. Whether she went against the mighty figures who controlled the chessboard or against the natural law, it was always the word Ni. Hua Yan looked at Su Li in a daze. At this moment, the pneuma naturally exuded from her old friend made her a little sad. Yes, some justice. No matter how much she paid, she would get it back. Good name. Hua Yan showed a big smile and turned to leave. As a result, the reputation of Ni sect spread quickly and quickly replaced Huajian sect and Yuling sect. Except for Meng's sect, one of the three sects, who tried to figure out the meaning, it did not cause much trouble. New sects rose every day in Zhejiu region, and it was common for a small sect to be established. In the next year, Ni sect gradually got on the right track. The difficult running in at the beginning finally paid off. After everyone accepted their new identity as disciples of Ni sect, Li Guang had less trouble. In the past year, Su Li did nothing but refine the celestial stone wholeheartedly. This was the first real closed-door practice since her reincarnation. Jining was released from the nightmare and mixed into the disciples of Naiman branch. A group of high-level people secretly looked after her, so her practice time was also smooth. Black, the nightmare, fell into a deep sleep. It seemed that the Dream Eater had entered the evolutionary stage. When it woke up, it should be able to help. One day, in the forbidden area of the back mountain of Ni sect, a violent fluctuation of spiritual power escaped. Even if there was a tactical matrix to block it, Hua Yan, who was outside, still felt frightened. It seemed that if a trace of spiritual power leaked out, she would be seriously injured. She stared at the blurred figure in the tactical matrix intently. She was so nervous and shocked that she had long been numb. 1 year was enough for her to accept the fact that Su Li was still in Lianqi realm. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never believe that there would be a practitioner in Lianqi realm whose strength was comparable to the peak of Yuanying realm in the world. In the tactical matrix, Su Li's state was not as dangerous as Hua Yan imagined. Instead, it was extremely comfortable. The 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. Tut tut, you also prepared nearly 1,000 Zhuji elixirs to transform genuine energy. Breaking through to Zhuji realm will be a piece of cake, and there will be no danger. Black Lotus ring emerged from Su Li's ring finger, and he was full of energy. In this year, he also absorbed a lot of celestial stones. Although he was not sure about the complete recovery of Black Lotus ring, his life as the spirit of Black Lotus ring was not so difficult after all. Su Li glanced at Black Lotus ring and did not speak. She focused on the pubic region. With the consumption of Zhuji elixirs, the outline of the foundation of the pubic region slowly appeared. Black Lotus had long been accustomed to Su Li's temperament, and his enthusiasm was not cold at all. He continued to shake his head and said, "In ancient times, there were many sayings about Zhuji realm. It was not as rough as you are now. If the talent is strong, the Zhuji platform can produce a vision and produce all kinds of incredible supernatural power." Su Li raised her eyes slightly, just the ghost clan. She had never seen the supernatural power of any human clan. Of course not. Black Lotus cried out, his tone filled with disdain. All living beings in the world. Even if you human clan are born weak, you have a large number. There will always be a few outliers born. There are many evildoers with supernatural power. You haven't seen it because the practice methods of cultivation are too rubbish. Su Li pursed her lips. Black Lotus's words were a bit straightforward, but he was right. In his eyes, if the Qingshui circle was developed with the Qingshui circle in ancient times, it would be wiped out in less than one day. Was the gap too big? Su Li's eyes flashed, and she suddenly remembered the cage mentioned by immortal Tsang Lei. Could it be, hey, what are you thinking about? Even if you don't have to worry about the process of Zhuji realm, you should at least see what the shape of your foundation is. It is the first time for me to see a practitioner who is still distracted when breaking through. You are the first one. Black Lotus interrupted Su Li's thinking angrily. Su Li came back to her senses, restrained her thoughts, and smiled slightly. Well, even if her guess was right, what could he do with his meager strength now? Let's worry about the future in the future. Hurry up. Tell me if there is any abnormal phenomenon. You have the body of evil ghost, and you have practiced to the 18th hurdle of Lianqi realm. You are absolutely abnormal. If there is no abnormal phenomenon, I will look down on you. Su Li was not affected by Black Lotus, and she calmly looked at her pubic region. But this look still made her face a little strange. Is it that the 12th grade Black Lotus gives birth to the abnormal phenomenon of the shadow of Black Phoenix? Black Lotus laughed and snorted. The phenomenon of Zhuji realm of each generation of the body of evil ghost is exactly the same. Now you know how powerful I am. How can this king's knowledge be something a mere junior like you can imagine? Su Li listened to the laughter coming from Black Lotus Ring, and suddenly felt that Black Lotus was a little pitiful. However, she still couldn't help interrupting, it doesn't seem to be. Black Lotus was like a drake being strangled, and he could no longer say a word. Chapter 401. I don't believe it. Black Lotus recovered from the embarrassment and shouted, Little Su Li, don't lie to me. You are a body of evil ghost, but you are not afraid of the divine thunder of the 5 elements. You even subdued one of them, which is very magical. The 12th grade Black Lotus is the supreme form of Zhuji of Ghost Clan, which is extremely noble. If even you only have the 11th grade Black Lotus, I really doubt that those sloppy and ordinary bodies of evil ghost in the past are fake. Hearing this, Su Li smiled slightly. Black Lotus should describe other bodies of evil ghost as sloppy and ordinary, which put her in a very special position. She remembered that when Black Lotus first contacted her, he was very disgusted with her body of evil ghost that had not even awakened her talent. Who told you that I only have the 11th grade Black Lotus? Su Li smiled and sent a video to Black Lotus while talking. Black Lotus was slightly stunned, and then he saw the content of the video and suddenly said in surprise, this is, what was reflected in its mind was an extremely mystical phenomenon. The pitch-black starry sky was dotted with blue stars. From time to time, arcs of blue lightning would flash across the sky. A black star was hanging high in the sky, and under the star, a black lotus throne was slowly rotating. The 18 lotus leaves were plump and moist. Starry sky vision. The 18th grade Black Lotus. Black Lotus gasped and stammered, this. I have been a spirit for more than 40,000 years, and I have never seen a starry sky vision. The Black Lotus has 18 grades. No. I have never heard of it, let alone seen it. If you get the magical power of Black Lotus transforming into sword and refine a total of 18 Black Lotus swords, my god. Su Li listened quietly. When she heard Black Lotus swords, her eyes suddenly flashed slightly. Black Lotus Ring. No matter what the real name of this treasure of Ghost Clan was, the Black Lotus mark on it was enough to show the high status of the Black Lotus in Ghost Clan. And the Black Lotus, which was the foundation of her body of evil ghost, and the magical power of sword derived from the Black Lotus, were all inseparable from the form of the Black Lotus. Is the body of evil ghost really a taboo of Ghost Clan? She murmured. When Black Lotus heard this, his nagging stopped abruptly. After a long time, Black Lotus said in a completely different and complicated tone, "Maybe not a long time ago, but my memory doesn't lie. Every generation of evil ghost is the enemy of the whole world, and they all die miserably. Not a good end." Suli repeated. Her eyes flickered, and no one knew what she was thinking. Black Lotus sighed, and the secret chamber fell into silence. In the main hall of the main peak, Hua Yan was discussing important matters with Yen Zai and others. Suddenly, a figure flashed in the middle of the long table, and an extra person appeared. Everyone was shocked. The conversation stopped. When the Great Elder, who was sitting on the second seat on the right, saw the person's face clearly, his eyes were immediately filled with shock. Isn't this the inner disciple who went to the flower pond to cultivate, Suyu? What was she doing here? Before he could recover from the shock, he heard Hua Yan say with a smile, "What's wrong? You finally decided to show your true face." Suli smiled lightly. "I believe that everyone here is not stupid enough to let the Grand Elder of your sect become the target of public criticism, right?" "Of course not." Yen Zai suppressed the excitement in his heart and spoke first. Then he glanced coldly at the faces of the Great Elder and Li Guang. His meaning was self-evident. "What? The true face of the Grand Elder is Suyu. It turns out that the Grand Elder has been hiding on Danxia Mount before. No wonder Wang Yu was exposed and died in the hands of the Grand Elder." The Great Elder secretly exclaimed in his heart. Thinking of all the things about Suyu before, he quickly speculated some information and quickly saluted with hands folded. "The Grand Elder is powerful, which is a blessing for our Ni sect. How can I harm the Ni sect?" Li Guang nodded in agreement. He had never seen Suyu before. Except that he was a little curious about Su Li's young face, he was not very surprised. Yen Zai, who knew more news, finally confirmed that Su Li was really reincarnated. Dongfang Wushua's speculation is right. After reincarnation, Miss Su has become more powerful. Her bone age is no more than 100, but her means are comparable to the late stage of Yuanning realm. Yen Zai sighed and rejoiced. He could follow Su Li in the real world. Such a good thing could happen to him. If it didn't really happen, he wouldn't even dare to think about it. "How is the Ni sect recently?" After a while, everyone calmed down. Su Li glanced at the four people in front of her and asked in a low voice. Hua Yan glanced at Yen Zai and nodded with a smile. "With the help of Elder Yen, the people of the two sects have been integrated into one after 1 year. They are all in Ni sect, but..." Speaking of this, she frowned slightly. "The people of Meng's sect are somewhat dishonest." "That's right." Yen Zai took over the topic and said in a deep voice, "After our two sects merged, Meng's sect was a little afraid. In the past 6 months, they have never stopped probing. Their disciples often have conflicts, but there has been no big conflict." Su Li nodded gently, and a light flashed in her eyes. Needless to say, an elder died on one side, and the 7th branch was seriously injured on the other side. Zihan's sect and Su family wouldn't let go of the enmity so easily. It was extremely quiet in the hall. Only Su Li's knuckles gently tapped on the table, making a rhythmic sound. After a while, Su Li raised her head and said to everyone, "Restrain the disciples of the Ni sect." Compared with the two sects, our foundation is too weak and can't afford to be tossed around. Since they don't want to be honest about the matter of Meng's sect, I will go there. Hearing this, everyone was slightly surprised except Yen Zai. Hua Yen couldn't help but say, Grand Elder, Meng's sect is not easy to deal with. Although there are no decent seniors in their sect, they have a book tactical matrix that is very difficult to deal with. Once trapped in it, it is difficult to get out. It doesn't matter. I have my own plan. Su Lich shook her head and said no more. She turned to look at Yen Zai. How about the things you collected? Yen Zai scratched his head and said with a wry smile, only the Dixin grass is missing. Others are all found, but I haven't even inquired about the Dixin grass. Su Lich chuckled. Of course you can't inquire about it. This medicine has always been monopolized by others. Yen Zai was surprised and happy. It was good to have news. Hua Yen hesitated. After hearing Su Li's words, her face finally changed slightly. Is the Dixin grass? Su Li glanced at her and said in a flat voice, if my plan can succeed, the Dixin grass is nothing. Hua Yan's eyes trembled slightly, and her mind was shocked. She suddenly stopped talking. Only she knew how big a storm Su Li's words would set off. Well, I will go to deal with Meng's sect first. Su Li got up and was about to leave. Yen Zai couldn't help but stand up hurriedly and said, I will go too. Practice hard, and there will be many opportunities to take action in the future. Su Li didn't stop. Her figure disappeared, leaving only her voice still echoing. On Dansha Mount, Jining still lived in the side hall, even though the mount head of Dansha Mount was still replaced by the original people of Yuling sect. Junior sister apprentice, you finally appeared. Su Li stepped in. Jining was counting the spiritual stones in the hall in boredom. When she heard the voice, she turned around and saw the person coming. She immediately cried out in surprise. Su Li came and sat beside Jining. She took out a jade slip and put it in front of her. What is this? Jining blinked curiously. Su Li smiled. The holy method you want. Half a day later, Jining got the holy method under the guidance of Su Li and entered the state of practice. Su Li walked out of the palace and saw the towering book pavilion at a glance. She thought of all the things that happened in that year. She stepped out and disappeared. On the top floor of the quaint white tower, a stooped old man was slowly sweeping the ground with a shabby broom. The sun outside the window was warm and shining on the body. Suddenly, the old man sensed something and pressed down. There was a shadow of a person on the ground. His pupils shrank and he looked up. When he saw the person, he immediately smiled. I'm Hua Weiyun. Grand Elder. Su Li pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She looked for a moment and found some problems. This person's pneuma was almost integrated with the White Tower, and it was only limited to the top floor. If he left here, he would immediately die of thirst like a fish without water. I heard some of the reasons from Hua Yan. For the sake of your guarding Hua Jin sect, I will help you. After a moment of silence, Su Li said, give me your practice method. Hearing this, Hua Weiyun, who was originally lifeless, immediately burst with dazzling light in his eyes. Without saying anything, he engraved the mental method he practiced on a jade slip and handed it to Su Li. He said, I learned this mental method from this wall. Unfortunately, after I succeeded, all the words on the wall disappeared. Su Li took it and frowned immediately. Hua Weiyun's heart thumped, and the joy in his heart was a little less. Although Hua Yan praised the Grand Elder, it seemed that he couldn't help him at this moment. It's also a holy method, but it is incomplete. Su Li glanced at it and was surprised. She walked to the smooth wall and touched it. She could vaguely feel the faint pneuma of time emitted from it. It was obviously an incomplete inheritance, which was accidentally obtained by Hua Weiyun. Because of the defect, Hua Weiyun practiced it with malpractice, which made it integrated with the top floor of the White Tower and couldn't be separated. Compared with the extreme tricks I have mastered, this method is more moderate and peaceful. It is more suitable for ordinary practitioners to practice. So, I will spend some time to complete this method and use it for inherited disciples of Ni sect to practice. It is not bad. Su Li pondered for a moment and made up her mind. She only told Hua Weiyun to wait for her news and left directly. Hua Weiyun watched Su Li leave and smiled bitterly, thinking that his expectation this time would be in vain. When Su Li set off for Meng's sect, there was a lot of noise in the conference hall of Meng's sect. What I said is true. Chapter 402. 34 Chinese net in 1 second. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Ho ho ho. As soon as Elder Qing finished his words, a brown-robed elder with triangular eyes sitting opposite him sneered mercilessly, Qing Weiwei, were you frightened by Bingshu in Wuyang town? Meng's sect is not afraid of a mere practitioner of Jindan realm. Right. Before Qing Weiwei had time to refute, First Elder, who was sitting with a sullen face, said and looked at Qing Weiwei with cold eyes, with the protection of the holy matrix of Liuhe Book, even if the mysterious woman you said is several times more powerful than immortal Bingshu and reaches Yuanying realm, she can never break through the holy matrix. Qing Weiwei's heart sank. Thinking of the relationship between sects, he kept silent for a moment and couldn't help but refute, if so, why did First Elder agree with Su family so rudely? How dare you? First Elder seemed to be trampled on his sore foot. He stood up immediately and pounded the table to scold, Qing Weiwei. You really let me down. How can you boost others' morale and diminish your own prestige? Who on earth is diminishing our prestige? Qing Weiwei also pulled a long face and was not afraid of First Elder at all. First Elder's face became more and more gloomy. He said angrily, although Su family is not one of the 25 sects, it is better than them. To some extent, it is even more horrible than Yushu's sect. I just got the news that Su Zipei, the eldest daughter of Su family who disappeared 1,000 years ago, is not dead. Instead, she is accepted as a personal disciple by the lord of a holy sect in another big region. She has a promising future. What? Hearing this, everyone was shocked. Su Zipei really got a great opportunity in the reincarnation environment. At that time, her talent and strength were always one step lower than Holy Girl Su. Now Su Zipei is so successful, but Holy Girl Su has been dead for 1,000 years. What a pity. This is the cultivation circle. If you are unlucky, no matter how talented you are, you can't enjoy it. There was a lot of discussion in the hall. Qing Weiwei was also a little shocked, but he soon calmed down and sneered, how ugly is the face of Su family. Everyone in Zhozhou region knows it. Meng's sect asks a tiger for its skin today, and we will be swallowed by it one day. First Elder, don't regret it. Without another word, he flicked his sleeves and left. The great elder watched him leave with a gloomy face. In the end, he couldn't help but flip the table and curse, bastard. Do you think you can order me around just because you've been in the sect for hundreds of years? Upon seeing this, the other elders hurried forward to comfort him. Great elder, please calm down. Calm down. Elder Qing was just thinking for the sake of the sect. He just couldn't get over it. He will definitely understand your painstaking efforts in the future. Yes, when we establish a relationship with the Su family, we can destroy the Ni sect easily. When the first elder heard everyone's comments, an inexplicable and strange look flashed in his eyes, but he pretended to be gratified on the surface and sighed, it's good that you can understand. The sect master travels all year round, and this old man feels deeply responsible, so his temper is a little violent. I've made a fool of myself in front of everyone. Ah, what are you saying, Great Elder? We are a family. Not bad, haha. Outside the hall, Elder Qing heard the laughter inside. He was angry, but more helpless. The Great Elder was determined to ruin the foundation of the Meng sect for hundreds of years, and the others were all flatterers and fence-sitters. At the moment, he had no way to remedy it, so he couldn't help but start to think of a way to escape. Yes, escape. Although he had some feelings for the Meng sect, most of them were for the sect master. Now that the sect master was not here, he couldn't stop the general trend even if he risked his life. He didn't want to be a mantis trying to stop a chariot. If the sect master knew my thoughts, he would probably be a little disappointed. Qing Weiyue laughed at himself bitterly, shook his head, and walked down the mountain road. Suddenly, he saw a petite girl standing in the middle of the road. She didn't wear the clothes of the Meng sect disciples. She wore a pure white dress, simple but unique temperament. With a jade hairpin, she looked simple and pure. He slightly exclaimed and curiously greeted her. Perhaps attracted by her temperament, he asked in a soft voice, "Which peak are you, a new disciple? Why are you here? You don't even wear the clothes of the disciples of the Meng sect." At this time, there was indeed a new batch of disciples in the Meng sect. Qing Weiyue couldn't see through Su Li, so he thought she was an ordinary mortal and didn't think much. Su Li was a little stunned. She blinked and said, "I don't know which peak I'm a disciple of. I just walked, and then I came here." Qing Weiyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out and sent Su Li to his flying magic weapon. While flying to one of the delicate peaks, he said, "The female disciples of the Meng sect are all on the Zayuna peak. The peak just now is the residence of the sect master. Ordinary disciples are not allowed to go there. Girl. Fortunately, you met me. Remember it next time." Su Li nodded slightly with a slight smile. At this moment, she changed her mind. It was better to give the Meng sect a chance to choose than to destroy the sect and hurt the innocent. The person in front of her might be a good leader of the next generation. Qing Weiyue didn't know that his subconscious action changed the fate of the whole sect. After sending Su Li to the Zayuna peak, he said something and left. The supervising disciple of the Zayuna peak glanced at the register with a strange look, but he didn't find any disciple named Su Yu. But since it was sent by the elder, it couldn't be wrong. After thinking for a moment, he simply added the name Su Yu at the end of the register. Then, for the sake of Qing Weiyue, he arranged Su Li's identity token and residence for her. Su Li was quite amused when she took the things to her residence. She inexplicably changed from an invader to a new disciple of the Zayuna peak. Putting on the cyan robe of a new disciple, Su Li's eyes flashed. She opened the door and walked to the top of the Zayuna peak without looking back. "Hey! Junior sister apprentice Su, you can't go there." The supervising disciple who was about to go back saw this scene and immediately stepped forward to stop her. But when he just came to Su Li, he was shrouded by an invisible force and couldn't move. "What's going on?" He showed horror in his eyes, but he couldn't change his expression. At this time, Su Li chuckled, "Don't worry. I just want you to accompany me to the top of the peak. You have performed well all the way. I don't want to kill a disciple of my own sect." "My own sect?" Upon hearing these words, the disciple in charge immediately relaxed. He thought to himself, so it's a senior in the sect who likes to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. Thinking of this, not only did he not panic, but he also felt happy as if he had been chosen by a big shot. Naturally, he didn't understand that the "my own sect" that Su Li said was completely different from what he understood. Su Li walked up the mountain along the neat white stone road. There were supervising disciples following her all the way, but no one came forward to ask questions, which saved a lot of trouble. She looked up at the sky, and her eyes showed the color of deduction. The protective tactical matrix of the sect was obviously broken and had no hindrance to her. She didn't know where the weird book tactical matrix that Hua Yan said was. While thinking, they had arrived in front of the hall on the top of the peak. This time, the identity of the supervising disciple didn't work. Seeing that they wanted to enter the hall, 2 guarding disciples immediately stepped forward to stop them and said coldly, "Do you have the order of the Mount Head?" The supervising disciple grinned and thought that Su Li was going to show her identity. But he saw that Su Li waved her hand, and the 2 guarding disciples rolled their eyes and plopped to the ground. "This, senior." The supervising disciple finally realized that something was wrong and panicked. Before he turned around and ran away, he felt his head was in a daze, and he fell to the ground like the 2 guarding disciples. "Who is presumptuous in my Zion Mount?" The people in the hall quickly noticed the abnormality, and a stern voice came. Su Li looked calm. She stretched out her hand and flicked her fingers. The 10th grade tactical matrix obtained from Chen Xianghan was thrown out, and the entire hall was instantly wrapped in it. This change happened in a flash. The people in the hall had no time to react, and it was too late to escape from the range of the tactical matrix. "Who comes to ask for advice? Why do you hide and use such despicable tricks?" The voice came again from the hall. The distance was getting closer, but the tone was much weaker than before. Su Li slowly stepped into the hall and saw a man and a woman standing in front of the hall. The man was in the early stage of Jindan realm, and the woman was in the late stage of Jindan realm. "Are you the Mount Head of Zion Mount?" Su Li's eyes fell on the beautiful woman, and her eyes were indifferent. The woman frowned and spread out her perception. But no matter how she sensed, the girl in front of her was a mist, and she couldn't see anything. This situation could only happen to 2 kinds of people. The first kind was that this woman had no cultivation and was an ordinary person. 2 disciples in Juji realm could break into the hall. Obviously, it could only be the second kind. This woman's cultivation was above the 2 of them. Thinking of this, the woman felt a pressure in her heart. She took a deep breath and nodded, "Yes. I am Gong Lishuan, the Mount Head of Zion Mount." "Who are you?" "Your surname is Gong." A memory flashed in Su Li's mind. Without saying anything, she went to the man beside Gong Lishuan and knocked him out. She asked, "Do you know Gong Xiangjuan?" "Gong Min." Gong Lishuan saw that her companion was knocked out, and she was relieved. But after hearing Su Li's question, she immediately shook her head, "No. That's a pity. If you know her, I may let you go." Su Li sighed slightly. Then she put her palm on the fainted man's vital acupuncture point. Gong Lishuan's face instantly turned pale, and she quickly said, "I really don't know her. Even if you kill me and my junior fellow apprentice, I don't know them. There are too many people with the same surname in the world. Is it wrong for my surname to be Gong?" Crack! Su Li knocked Gong Lishuan out with one palm. It seemed that this woman really didn't know her. "Well, I have met enough people now, and there is no need to inquire deliberately," she said to herself, grabbed the 2 fainted people, stood on the flying sword, and flew to a nearby mountain. After arriving at the 3rd mountain peak, Su Li stood quietly in the void of the hall of the sect. The shadow of the isolation tactical matrix appeared and disappeared from time to time, blocking the sight of ordinary disciples of Meng's sect, but deliberately allowing practitioners above Jindan realm to see it clearly. Behind her, 4 unconscious figures lay quietly in the void, and 3 of them were the Mount Heads. If Su Li opened the last barrier of the 10th grade tactical matrix and let ordinary disciples see it, Meng's sect would absolutely be in chaos instantly. Don't let me wait too long. Su Li narrowed her eyes and whispered. A figure flashed in the hall of the main peak, and finally appeared. Chapter 403. Above the nothingness, the first elder of the Meng sect slowly flew out from the hall of the main peak, followed by several elders. Seeing that Su Li didn't have anything under her feet, they were all shocked and frightened. Those who could fly in the air were at least in Yuanying realm. Although he was full of confidence when quarreling with Qing Weiyue, how could he not be afraid when facing an enemy in Yuanying realm? That was someone who could easily kill him. When did the Meng sect offend an old monster in Yuanying realm? He was confused, but he had to fly to Su Li on his sword and stop. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior, please calm down. I am Pang Yukai, the first elder of the Meng sect. If my Meng sect has offended you, you can sit down and talk. There is no need to use weapons to destroy the harmony." Harmony. Su Li smiled meaningfully and said softly, "I heard that your sect has been bullying my disciples in the past year. It is not me who hurt the harmony first." Hearing this, the first elder's face changed slightly, and he blurted out, "Are you the grand elder of the Ni sect?" Su Li glanced at Qing Weiyue, who flew behind the first elder, and was shocked. She said coldly, "Is there any other grand elder in the Ni sect, huh? I just practiced in isolation for a year, and your Meng sect almost bullied my disciples. If I practiced in isolation for 100 years, wouldn't I have been destroyed by you? Senior, please calm down." The Grand Elder felt a chill run down his spine when he heard this, and his scalp went numb. He hurriedly said, "It's our fault for not teaching our disciples well, causing the misunderstanding to occur. We have no intention of plotting against your sect. Please investigate this matter, Senior." "Oh." Su Li sneered with a faint smile, who said in the hall of the main peak, that he would unite with the Su family to deal with our Ni sect. As soon as he said that, First Elder and others were in a panic. What they said just now was heard by the Grand Elder of Ni sect. "What should we do? The arrangement of the Su family is not perfect, and the holy tactical matrix has not been opened. How can I deal with the enemy?" The first elder was so anxious that his forehead was full of cold sweat. The atmosphere at this moment dropped to the freezing point and almost solidified. "Senior," at this critical moment, Qing Weiyue braced himself to step forward and said with hands folded, "For the sake of what happened before, can we sit down and talk?" As Qing Weiyue said, he sighed inwardly. After all, he still cared about the sect master's life-saving grace. Although there was a 99% chance that this female senior did not put him in her eyes, but he had tried his best, and his heart was clear. "All right." Su Li nodded lightly. She didn't want to fight in public. It was not good for her to expose more tricks. "Senior, this way please." First Elder was pleasantly surprised. He was worried that there was no way to delay the opening of the holy tactical matrix. Su Li's promise came just in time. Su Li saw the first elder pointing to the hall in the direction of the back mountain. After a moment of silence, she let out an inexplicable chuckle and flew in with the 4 unconscious people behind her. Although the first elder didn't understand why Su Li was so straightforward, he didn't have time to think about it. He immediately led the others to follow her, and didn't forget to praise her. "Weiyue, you did a good job this time. You won enough time for the sect. When this thing is over, you will be rewarded." Qing Weiyue's face changed slightly, and his relaxed heart immediately tightened again. "Isn't it a peace talk?" "First Elder, don't act recklessly." The first elder snorted coldly. "Qing Weiyue, don't run a die house just because of my kindness. I don't blame you for letting the Grand Elder of the Ni sect enter the sect without my permission, but you want to blame me? It's not your turn to tell me what to do. Get out of my way. Ning Dawei, don't slander me. I didn't let anyone in." Qing Weiyue retorted angrily, but the first elder sneered, "We all heard what you said to the grand elder of the Ni sect. How dare you deny it?" "That's because I mistook her for..." Qing Weiyue opened his mouth and didn't continue. Su Li caught 3 mount heads in a row. With such amazing strength, if she was mistook as a new disciple, even he himself didn't believe it. "You can't make it up anymore." Ning Dawei's tone became more and more outrageous. "Qing Weiyue, don't forget that you are a foreign elder of the Mang sect. I don't care about it this time, but don't push your luck." As he said, he glanced at the 2 elders beside him and ordered, "Keep an eye on him, and no one is allowed to touch him." "Yes, first elder." The 2 elders looked at Qing Weiyue, who was embarrassed, and chuckled softly. Their cultivation was enough to suppress Qing Weiyue. After that, Ning Dawei walked to the front of the hall in the back mountain. Sensing the holy tactical matrix that was half open, he straightened his back and walked in. At a glance, he saw Su Li, who seemed to be appreciating the decoration of the hall with her back to him. Subconsciously, Ning Dawei bowed slightly, and then felt humiliated and angry. When he was about to pluck up courage to speak, he saw Su Li suddenly turned around and smiled. "Is the tactical matrix open?" Ning Dawei was confused, and his right hand holding the matrix plate in his sleeve trembled slightly. He asked in a low voice, "Senior, what tactical matrix did you say? I don't understand." The smile in Su Li's eyes was more obvious, but her words became colder. "Do you think a loser like you is qualified to make peace with me? I waited patiently just to see your book Tactical Matrix, but you tell me that you are not ready? You..." Ning Dawei was shocked and angry, but more panicked. He directly pressed the core of the matrix plate, regardless of the holy tactical matrix that was half open. In an instant, a huge shadow of a golden book emerged from the ground, and wrapped Su Li and Ning Dawei in it. Ha 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 ha, Ning Dawei couldn't help laughing when he saw Su Li waiting for the big tactical matrix to close obediently. She really wanted to see the holy tactical matrix, scoundrel. How dare you break into the big tactical matrix of the Mang sect? Today I will let you know that even a practitioner of Yuanying realm is just a nonentity in the real power of the holy tactical matrix of the Mang sect. After that, he pointed at the matrix plate and shouted, "Turn the characters into swords. Go!" As the command of the matrix plate was issued, the golden characters on the shadow of the book immediately left the page, and turned into small golden swords, shooting at Su Li's vital parts. Su Li showed some interest. She waved her palm to set a genuine energy shield several inches thick, and then stretched out one hand from the genuine energy shield to grab the small golden swords. "How arrogant you are! You dare to catch the golden swords transformed by the holy tactical matrix with your mortal body." Ning Dawei couldn't help but ridicule her. But the next scene made him hold back all his laughter. He was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. There was a puffing sound in the center of the book tactical matrix. Almost all the flying swords were stuck in the genuine energy shield, as if they were stuck in a swamp, unable to move. One of the small swords was restrained by Su Li's 2 fingers, motionless. What? She really caught it. Ning Dawei was so shocked that he almost let go of the matrix plate. What kind of monster is she? Catching the holy swords with bare hands, and the genuine energy shield several inches thick. Wait. Genuine energy shield. She is actually in Juji realm. Ning Dawei was almost completely dumbfounded by this series of shock. But Su Li frowned slightly at this moment. She let go of the golden sword and took back her hand. There was a little red on her fingers. It can actually hurt me. This tactical matrix is really extraordinary, but that's all. Su Li murmured softly, with a little disappointment in her eyes. She urgently needed to confirm her own cultivation, but the so-called book tactical matrix obviously didn't meet the standard she wanted. Forget it. There are many opportunities. It's no big deal to take some risks. While shaking her head, Suli flashed to the front of Ning Dawei like a ghost, and reached out to grab the matrix plate. So fast. Ning Dawei was frightened. In the crisis of life and death, he was unusually calm, and directly crushed the matrix plate. He looked ferocious and crazy, Grand Elder of Ni sect. You forced me to do this. Sixfold Holy Realm, show me. As soon as he finished speaking, the matrix plate in Ning Dawei's hand shattered by itself, and he kept vomiting blood. His pneuma instantly became so weak that it could hardly be sensed. He fell to the ground, and his face was as pale as paper. Looking at Suli in front of him, he laughed nervously in a low voice, regardless of the sequela caused by using the forbidden skill. Even if you are a monster, so what? You will still die in my hands. As he laughed, he cried again. At first, he sobbed in a low voice, and soon he burst into tears. The price of using the sixfold holy realm was his lifespan. He couldn't live long. Suli glanced at the healed wound on her fingertips, and then glanced around with a faint vigilance in her eyes. This book tactical matrix was a little different. She probed with her psychic awareness and found nothing. She couldn't help but take a breath and pondered. Psychic awareness doesn't work. Is the sixfold holy realm a maze? While she was thinking, a golden light appeared without warning, and shot to Suli's chest faster than lightning. I can't dodge it. Suli's pupils shrank suddenly, and she only had time to avoid the vital parts. Swish! The golden light flashed, and Suli groaned. A hole was pierced through her shoulder. In the blink of an eye, the white clothes on her right shoulder were dyed blood red. Even my genuine energy can't resist it. What kind of power is this? While shrinking the wound to stop the bleeding, Suli became more vigilant and observed the surroundings. But the golden light seemed to have a spirit, and it directly appeared behind Suli next time. Although Suli wanted to dodge, she couldn't keep up with her reaction speed, and she was still hurt. This time, it was her right arm. After several times, Suli's whole body was stained with blood, and the power emitted a sharp characteristic. No wound could be completely stopped bleeding. Suli's face was a little pale, but her eyes were still terrifyingly calm, as if she wasn't the one who was hurt. This kind of power is very strange. I haven't touched it in my previous life or now, so I can't understand it. Her eyes were full of thoughts. After a short contact with the golden light, she finally understood it. But she still couldn't figure out the nature and origin of this power. She thought for a moment and passed this understanding to Black Lotus. The next moment, Black Lotus suddenly shouted. Little Suli, how did you provoke this thing? Chapter 404. After all, Black Lotus had lived for many years and recognized the origin of the golden light at once. He transmitted the sound quickly. I don't know what it is called in the cultivation circle now. But in ancient times, it was the power that could only be mastered by practitioners in Huashan realm, the Will realm. Will realm? Suli repeated and asked, just like the sword intent. Yes, and no. In short, the power of the Will realm is beyond your understanding now. This golden light is transformed by the Will realm of the book. If you can't understand the meaning of the book, you can't break the matrix and will eventually die of blood loss. Be careful. Suli's eyes darkened. She stared vigilantly at the golden light coming from an unknown direction in the next moment. There was a law of conservation of all things. The price for the idiot first elder of Meng's sect to start the tactical matrix would not be too simple, and the matrix would not be maintained for a long time. Now the only problem was, could she persist in the tactical matrix to the end? Drip, drip, in the silent tactical matrix, only the blood dripped along Su Li's fingers. Drop by drop, it melted into the tactical matrix and spread along the lines. Before Su Li noticed it, the blood gradually eroded the tactical matrix. The original golden tactical matrix gradually turned red, until it was enchanting and black. Crack, a slight but harsh sound rang. Su Li's ears moved slightly. What's that sound? She looked down at the ground and couldn't help but shrink her pupils. What she saw was a piece of enchanting red. With her as the center, the tactical matrix within a radius of 10 feet had been completely eroded. And with the infiltration of the blood, the scope of erosion was still expanding. My blood actually, Su Li was shocked. At this time, she heard a jingle. She looked up and happened to see a golden pocket-sized sword rolling over and stopping at her feet. Then, with a flash of white light, it turned into a book-like magic weapon. But the golden light emitting from it was very dim. She subconsciously picked up the book-like magic weapon. Suddenly, boom! The phantom of the holy tactical matrix suddenly broke and turned into countless fragments. Ning Dawei bore the brunt and was directly shot into a sieve. He died with a look of astonishment. He really wanted to know why the Lyoha book tactical matrix, which was passed to him by the sect master, actually recognized the enemy as the master. Unfortunately, he no longer had the chance to get the answer. Su Li glanced at Ning Dawei's corpse, and a burst of white smoke floated on the surface of her body. In a moment, all the wounds healed by themselves. After the scars fell off, no trace of injury could be seen. After the array closed, the power of the conception that Black Lotus had mentioned also dissipated. Superficial wounds were nothing to her, who had a powerful body. Weighing the dark golden book in her hand, Su Li's eyes flashed a trace of strangeness. The feeling of being connected by blood. This magic treasure has recognized me as its master. She didn't use any blood sacrifice spell, and she couldn't find the main body of the magic circle under such circumstances. How did this magic treasure recognize her as its master? Black Lotus, you clearly said that concepts are extremely difficult to break, but why is it like this now? Su Li asked softly, and then she heard a sigh from Black Lotus Ring, who said weakly, Master, you are so smart. You should have guessed the reason, right? Su Li was stunned for a moment and blinked. I want to hear it from you. This was the first time that Black Lotus was willing to call her master, and he even learned to flatter her. Was it just because he saw the power in her blood? Hearing Su Li's reply, Black Lotus immediately became sad and angry, and said madly, Little Su Li, you are so cruel. Do you know how horrible the talent you have awakened is? It is the legendary talent of the Ghost Clan. It is possible to awaken this talent in every generation of the body of evil ghost, but no one has awakened it since the ancient cultivation era. Talent. Su Li spread out her hands, and her eyes seemed to penetrate the skin and see the blood flowing in her body. Is this a talent? Yes. Black Lotus's tone became cautious. This talent is called blood poison. Although the name is simple, its function is very horrible, and it has all kinds of unpredictable characteristics. For example, Little Su Li, your blood poison can erode the core of any tactical matrix and seize control. If nothing goes wrong with this talent, as your cultivation level increases, more unpredictable effects will appear, and the toxicity will become stronger and stronger. This is the real horror of blood poison. Su Li listened and clenched her hands. Blood poison, what was flowing in her body now was such a vicious thing, and she didn't feel when this talent was awakened. If I guess right, your talent has been awakened when you broke through the Zhuji realm, but it is invisible. If you are not injured, it is difficult to find. Black Lotus speculated and continued, when I just had spiritual wisdom, I had seen this kind of talent in the ancient records of the Ghost Clan. It is said that there was a generation of body of evil ghost who awakened blood poison. If he shed a drop of blood, he could poison 10,000 people to death. The 10,000 people here are not ordinary mortals, but practitioners with the same strength as him. Black Lotus's tone was cold. A successful body of evil ghost has an extremely powerful ability to produce blood. His blood is enough to kill all the practitioners of the same generation in Qingshui's circle. This horrible talent finally disappeared because the body of evil ghost was too arrogant and was suppressed by a powerful figure. However, blood poison has also become a talent that the Ghost Clan yearns for and fears. Hearing this, Suli was enlightened and said softly, "So, my talent is the same as the body of evil ghost, and I can't mention it to anyone." "No." Black Lotus was extremely serious and said in a deep voice, "Little Suli, you have to remember that even if your body of evil ghost is exposed, you can't tell anyone about your talent of blood poison. If someone finds it, kill them immediately. This is a taboo that is more frightening than the body of evil ghost. Be careful." Hearing this, Suli shook her head and smiled. Perhaps there were too many things to hide. At this moment, she didn't feel much even if there was one more. Today, her mentality had changed a lot compared with when she just recovered her memory. The natural law is changeable. Now my fate is not in the natural law. Anyway, I have to go on this path I have chosen. When Suli put on a new white dress and walked out of the palace in the back mountain, the glimmer of dawn happened to shine. It turned out that she had stayed in the tactical matrix for a day and a night unknowingly. The elders who were waiting in front of the main hall had apprehensive expressions on their faces. Looking at the person who walked out from the golden light of dawn, all the elders' expressions changed dramatically and their hearts sank rapidly. Thud, 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 Suli walked unhurriedly. The sound of her footsteps seemed to knock on everyone's heart, causing them to step back together until there was no way to retreat. Suli glanced around and didn't see Qing Weiwei. But she didn't care. She turned over her palm, and a dim golden book appeared. She said lightly, "The first elder of Meng's sect failed to make peace with me and wanted to kill me. He has been executed. Do you want to follow in his footsteps? This is the holy tactical matrix of the sect. The holy tactical matrix of the sect has been broken. Even the holy tactical matrix has fallen into their hands. What are we?" Recognizing the magic treasure in Suli's hand, the elders who were still hesitating directly knelt down and shouted in unison, "Greetings, Grand Elder. Greetings, Grand Elder. Greetings, Grand Elder. Grand Elder, you will bring us to the peak." Looking at a group of fence-sitters constantly kowtowing in front of her, Suli squinted her eyes and chuckled in a low voice. In the face of true power, all conspiracies and schemes would be futile. This was the supreme law of the cultivation circle. Qing Weiwei, who was imprisoned in a hall in the back mountain, couldn't help but sigh when he heard those neat shouts. Meng's sect can't be saved after all. He sighed, but there was not much regret in his heart. Instead of falling into the ruthless Su family, it was the best choice to integrate with Ni's sect to protect himself. It depended on how big the ambition of the Grand Elder of Ni's sect was. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but remember the scene when he mistakenly recognized Suli as a new disciple a few days ago. He couldn't help but feel a little strange. So the Grand Elder, maybe, it was also a new opportunity for him. A few hours later, all disciples were called to wait in front of the palace in the back mountain, including Qing Weiwei. It was rare for all the elders of the sect to gather together. They discussed in private and felt uneasy. They didn't know what the new master of Meng's sect wanted to do. Qing Weiwei stood among them and felt relaxed. He vaguely guessed Suli's purpose. Soon, two elders walked out of the palace. Their faces were extremely pale, but they were not injured. Ninth elder, 10th elder, you are in there. What did the grand elder say to you? The one who spoke was a benevolent old man with a bent back. His cultivation was not simple. He had reached the peak of Jindan realm. Qing Weiyue's eyes darkened when he saw him, and he sneered in his heart. He was the second elder of Meng's sect, Pang Yueling. After Ning Daoi's death, he immediately became active. Unfortunately, his tricks were not enough for the new Grand Elder. When 9th Elder and 10th Elder saw Pang Yueling, they forced a smile. When they were about to speak, they suddenly thought of something. Their faces changed, and they left in a hurry without saying anything. Pang Yueling's smile froze on his face, but he returned to normal in an instant. When he glanced around, he saw Qing Weiyue standing in the crowd. He was about to approach him, but a calm voice came from the palace at this time. Elder Qing Weiyue, come in. Pang Yueling's footsteps stopped abruptly. Qing Weiyue looked at him and showed a meaningful smile. Then he turned around and stepped into the door without looking back. Being ignored twice in a row, Pang Yueling couldn't keep a straight face anymore. Looking at the closed door of the palace, his expression was gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. When Qing Weiyue stepped into the palace, the light dimmed a little. He immediately saw Su Li sitting on the throne in the hall with her right arm supporting her chin. She was resting with her eyes closed. As Qing Weiyue walked to the throne, Su Li opened her eyes and said softly, Elder Qing, you are a smart person. You should know what I want you to do. Chapter 405. Qing Weiyue bowed respectfully and then raised his head. He said in a clear voice, I didn't know it before. But after thinking about it, Grand Elder, you had several opportunities to destroy us, but you chose to do it in the back mountain, which didn't affect the operation of the sect. You probably wanted to take Meng's sect for your own use. Then, he put his right fist on his chest and lowered his head. If Grand Elder doesn't think Weiyue is weak, I'm willing to work for you. Oh. Su Li changed her sitting posture and leaned lazily on the throne. She said with a faint smile, I heard from the two just now that the Lord of the Meng sect saved your life. After I take control of the sect, the name of the Meng sect will no longer exist. Don't you want to take revenge on me? Qing Weiyue felt cold all over and said with a bitter smile, Grand Elder, to tell you the truth. After the Lord disappeared, I didn't have a good time in the sect. After hundreds of years, my sense of belonging has almost been consumed. If you didn't show up, I would have planned to find another way out. Cooperating with the Su family is tantamount to digging my own grave. Su Li squinted her eyes slightly. She could hear that Qing Weiyue was telling the truth. You know the nature of the Su family. Thinking of the past, Su Li looked a little cold. Qing Weiyue didn't notice it. He just said honestly, I suffered losses in the hands of the Su family. My life is in danger because of them. No wonder. Su Li nodded slightly and knocked on the throne with her knuckles. She said slowly, then do you know the specific cooperation between the Su family and Meng sect this time? Hearing this, Qing Weiyue finally breathed a sigh of relief and thought that the new Grand Elder was really spying on the Su family. He was very happy to see that Su Li was the enemy of the Su family. After all, it was impossible for him to take revenge by himself. But now, he saw a glimmer of hope. Ning Daoe was on guard against me. Although he once told me about the cooperation with the Su family, he didn't tell me the details because of my strong opposition. Now Ning Daoe is dead. If Grand Elder wants to know, you can ask the second elder, Pang Yueling. He is the one who knows the plan best besides the first elder. Qing Weiyue gave up Pang Yueling without hesitation and added, now Pang Yueling is outside the door. Su Li nodded gently. What Qing Weiwei said was the same as what those two people said before. But he said it willingly, while those two people didn't want to, so she used some means. After thinking for a moment, Su Li looked straight at Qing Weiwei. She stared at Qing Weiwei until the latter got goosebumps all over. Then she said with a chuckle, Qing Weiwei, you want to take revenge on the Su family by my hand. Then, you can't follow me just because you say so. How about I let you deal with Pang Yueling? Qing Weiyue's expression slightly changed. After a moment of silence, he gritted his teeth and nodded. If he wanted something, he naturally had to pay the price. He understood this principle. Very well, I hope you can give me a satisfactory answer. Seeing Qing Weiwei nodded, Su Li smiled even more. She flicked her fingers, and the pocket-sized golden book flew to Qing Weiwei. When Qing Weiwei was in doubt, he heard the voice from the throne, I lend this to you first, and you can easily deal with the second elder. Go ahead. Qing Weiwei was slightly shocked, and subconsciously put down the golden book. He was still a little confused. The six-fold holy tactical matrix of Meng's sect really recognized her as its owner. It is clearly the Lord's thing, and Ning Dawei just borrowed it. How could it be possible? While his mind was in a mess, Qing Weiwei knew there was no way back. He put away the golden book bag, saluted Su Li, and went out without saying anything. After a while, there was a noise of chaos outside the door, but soon, it subsided. Su Li narrowed her eyes, and then she immersed herself in refining Zhonglei's cave. During the 1 year's retreat, she didn't have time to refine the cave, and this matter should also be put on the agenda. If she could release Dongfang Wuxue as soon as possible, she would have one more reliable helper. Only 2 days later, Qing Weiwei returned to the hall. There was an unconcealable tiredness in his eyes, but his eyes were extremely bright, as if he had completed a transformation in these 2 days. Sitting on the throne, Su Li slowly opened her eyes and said, You didn't stay in Meng's sect for hundreds of years in vain. Hearing this, Qing Weiwei was shocked, and his impetuous heart because of unifying Meng's sect completely calmed down. He was not the only elder who had been excluded in Meng's sect for hundreds of years, so he also secretly drew over many forces. This time, with Su Li as his backer, his force surfaced, and it was easy to change the regime of Meng's sect, without letting any news leak out. However, he was very clear about the premise of all this, so after calming down, he quickly adjusted his mentality, and respectfully said, Grand Elder, you flatter me. If I don't even have this little strength, how dare I recommend myself? Whether Ni sect or Meng sect, they are all forces under the control of the Grand Elder, and I just manage them on behalf of the Grand Elder. You don't have to say this to me. Su Li slightly raised her eyes, and her eyes flashed with intimidating light. As long as you can work for me at a specific time, it is okay to let you be the Lord of Meng's sect. How about the investigation of the Su family? Qing Weiyue's heart suddenly beat faster, but he forced himself to calm down, and respectfully said, Pang Yueling didn't want to say it at first, but he couldn't hold on for 2 days under my means. Speaking of this, Qing Weiyue paused, seeming to sort out his thoughts. After a moment, he continued, Ning Dawei only belongs to the 7th branch of the Su family as the representative of Meng's sect, and there is no substantial transaction for the time being. But half a month later, the 7th branch will re-establish the 7th Miss Su, and will hold a promotion banquet in a yard. At that time, all the sects that belong to the 7th branch will be present. Qing Weiyue frowned. At that time, I am afraid that the Su family will gather all the forces to discuss how to deal with us. Su Li was calm and lightly snorted. The Su family always likes to kill people with a borrowed knife, and is never willing to take risks in person. I think I scared the butler in front of the sect last time, but it doesn't matter. Let's go and listen to it together. What? Let's go and listen to it together. Qing Weiyue's eyes widened, and he couldn't understand it for a while. Su Li's eyes curved, and she chuckled. Hasn't Meng's sect surrendered to the Su family? Then why not you go to the promotion banquet? Grand Elder, you mean? Qing Weiyue realized it. He opened his mouth, but felt thirsty, and didn't know what to say. It was too risky for them to break into the dragon's pool and the tiger's den. You are Qing Weiyue of Meng's sect, not mine. I have tried my best to cover up the process of the change of head of Meng's sect. Don't let me down. Su Li's indifferent voice echoed in his ears, and Qing Weiyue suddenly felt cold in his heart. It turned out that the reason why the Grand Elder went to the back mountain to fight with Ning Dawei was not to preserve Meng's sect completely, but because of this. She has long guessed the movement of the Su family. It's really terrible that a person's mind and vision can be so far-sighted. Qing Weiyue's forehead was slightly sweating, and he didn't have any strange thoughts in his heart. He respectfully said yes and left the hall, and began to prepare for the trip to Yun Yard. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Yan Zai received a message from Su Li, and secretly came to Meng's sect to temporarily take the position of Qing Weiyue. With the fierce reputation of Immortal Bingshu, even if they knew that Qing Weiyue was about to leave the sect with Su Li, no one dared to do anything. It's almost time. Looking at the sky, Su Li stepped on the end of Qing Weiyue's flying sword, and turned to look at Yan Zai. Yan Zai was instantly refreshed, nodded slightly, and transmitted the sound, "Don't worry, Master. I will keep a close eye on Meng's sect, and no information will be leaked." Su Li's cold eyebrows and eyes were slightly soft. She nodded slightly, and took back her eyes. Seeing this, Qing Weiyue thought of something, and the flying sword under his feet immediately rushed to the sky with a whoosh, and disappeared in the sky after a few breaths. Yan Zai looked up at the sky, and slowly breathed out a foul breath. Everything is difficult at the beginning. Master, be careful. At the same time, Yun Yard was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, and the busy figures of servants in the yard kept shuttling back and forth. Only a room in the depth of the yard was quite deserted. In front of the room, 2 servants in steward's clothes were whispering, and their expressions were quite weird. I didn't expect that the 7th Miss should be Su Yuxing. Yes. Is the owner crazy? How can a person whose soul has been polluted by the rebirth realm be the outstanding Miss of our Su family? It is said that Miss Su Zini died in a hurry, and the owner of the house is desperate for the selection of talents. But it is too absurd. He didn't think about how much trouble the second holy girl of Yushu's sect made, and now, Before the 2 stewards finished their words, a cold snort suddenly came into their ears, and the 2 were so scared that their faces turned pale, and they didn't dare to speak. In the room, Su Yuxing quietly looked at herself in the mirror, dressed up, and looked at the angry little maid beside her. She couldn't help but laugh. Xiaoyu, why do you care about these servants? Xiaoyu, with 2 small buns of hair, turned around, stamped her feet, and pouted, "Miss, I just can't stand it. You are clearly sober, and your strength is absolutely not worse than any miss of the Su family. How can you follow that lunatic?" Xiaoyu. Su Yuxing's face became cold, and Xiaoyu knew that she said something wrong. She immediately stuck out her tongue. "In short, you absolutely deserve to be the 7th Miss of the Su family. Su Zini doesn't even deserve to carry shoes for you." Su Yuxing shook her head and said nothing, looking at herself in the mirror quietly. Was she crazy? Maybe, all the people who had entered the rebirth realm were crazy. She couldn't tell whether she was the miss of the Su family or the sister of that person, and in her heart, she was more inclined to the latter. She had no reason to be reluctant to leave the cold Su family, which only cared about profits. Although we are not in the same era, my sister seems to be born in the Su family in her early years, and then went to Yushu sect. But why? I can't find any trace of her living in the Su family in the past 1,000 years. Thinking of this, Su Yuxing sighed softly. Maybe when she became the 7th Miss of the Su family, she could find more clues. Sister. Chapter 406. At sunset, there were more and more people in Iyun Yard. The power of the 7 branches of Su family was not worse than any of the 25 sects, even more. When the news of the promotion banquet of the 7th Miss came out, countless small forces and sects came to congratulate. There was no accident this time. When Qing Weiyue took Su Li to land not far from the yard, he saw a long queue at the gate. Grand Elder, how can we get in? Qing Weiyue was calm on the surface when he came to the enemy's territory, but he couldn't help being nervous. Su Li looked at the vicissitudes of Iyun Yard. Hearing Qing Weiyue's transmitted sound, she smiled slightly, and her gentle and calm voice sounded in Qing Weiyue's mind. Remember, if you want to deceive others, you have to deceive yourself first. Do you understand? Su Li's voice seemed to have a strange power, which calmed Qing Weiyue down. He thought about Su Li's words and nodded thoughtfully. Now that you understand, let's go in. Su Li put a gentle force on Qing Weiyue's back, which immediately made him stagger and pass the queue. For a moment, all the representatives of small forces who were lining up to enter the yard looked at him. Feeling so many eyes, Qing Weiyue couldn't help but feel numb. He smiled bitterly in his heart and strode to the gate of the yard. At this moment, although he was still a little perturbed, he had already understood Su Li's words. After coming up with a plan in his mind, he changed his gentle expression and slightly raised his head. The arrogance that emanated from him actually caused many of the representatives of the small forces to not dare to look directly at him. Which big force comes to congratulate us? Why is he so unfamiliar? He must be one of the top forces in the 25 sections. No wonder he dares to cut the queue. Nonsense. The people of the 25 sects don't need to line up. When can I join the 25 sects? When people were talking about it, Qing Weiyue took Su Li to the doorman and said proudly, "I'm the representative of Meng's sect. It's very important for us to come here. Let us in." The doorman thought Qing Weiyue had a great background. But when he heard it was Meng's sect, his face suddenly became sullen. After a moment, he silently stepped aside and said, "Please." Qing Weiyue laughed and strode into the yard with Su Li. Why? Does the Meng sect have a great background? Another doorman couldn't help but ask. The gloomy doorman sneered and said, "How is that possible? He's just a sesame-sized sect, and he's already overestimating himself just because he wants to climb up to our 7th branch. I've seen many people like him, and there will be plenty of opportunities to deal with him in the future." The other doorman nodded as if he understood. He wondered when he could reach the level of the old doorman. Of course, the conversation between the doormen could not be heard by Qing Weiyue. At this moment, he took Su Li to the quiet and secluded courtyard and breathed a sigh of relief. Suddenly, he felt his back was wet. Taking a breath, Qing Weiyue felt an indescribable excitement from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help clenching his fists. "I have never done such an exciting thing in my life." Thinking of this, he looked at Su Li, who was looking around without much expression as usual. Suddenly, he felt the gap in their realms. Was she an evildoer? At this time, Su Li pointed to the front and said lightly, "The layout of Iyun Yard is symmetrical. It's square, and the biggest courtyard in the middle is the place where the promotion ceremony is held. You can get in touch with the person in charge of the 7th branch when you go there. I don't need to remind you what to do next." Qing Weiyue came to his sense and was stunned. After nodding subconsciously, he came to himself and asked repeatedly, "Alone?" Suli slightly raised her eyebrows. Do you want me to accompany you? Qin Weiwei shuddered and said no repeatedly. Then he hesitated and said, but the courtyard is heavily guarded, it's not something you need to care about. Suli turned around and waved her hand, let's go. In the blink of an eye, she turned into the dimly lit path and disappeared. Yes, the Grand Elder is omnipotent. The guard of the yard is nothing to her. Qin Weiwei figured it out and became spirited. He raised his head and left in the direction pointed by Suli. He still had a tough battle to fight. Deep in the yard, there were intricate passages. Suli walked on one of the paths. The stone road was wet with evening dew. Her eyes flashed and looked at the winding path in the distance. From Qin Weiwei, she knew that Yun Yard had been an important place for holding promotion banquets for thousands of years. But Yun Yard was not as luxurious or geographical location as any other yard of the 7th branch of Su family. It was still a mystery why the Su family set it as an important place to entertain guests. After a while, a wall appeared in front of Suli. It seemed that she had reached the end of the road. Her eyes flashed. She plucked a willow leaf and shot it at random with her fingers. It nailed into a spot on the white wall. The old and decaying wall immediately rippled, and then quietly dispersed, revealing its original appearance. Behind the arched wall door, there was a long-abandoned farmhouse. There was only a small hut in the yard, a square stone table, a small vegetable field, and a stone well for daily meals. It turned out that the wall was just a magic matrix. Seeing the small yard, Suli chuckled and walked into the small yard. She used a spell to clear the dust on the ground. Sitting beside the small stone table in the yard, she looked nostalgic. It has been so many years. I didn't expect that no one had found it. Suli glanced at the yard and suddenly fixed her eyes. She reached out and a piece of rope beside the stone well that had not decayed fell into her hand. When she gently rubbed it, the dust covering the surface faded, and a golden luster appeared. Immortal golden silk for thousands of years. Fiddling with the rope in her hand, Suli let out a low laugh. There is something strange. In the previous life in Jojo region, almost everyone knew that she was the holy girl of Yushu's sect and the apprentice of Elder Mo Qin, but few people knew her origin. Because of her surname, many people once guessed that she came from the Su family, but it was quickly denied. The reason was that if there was such a proud girl in the Su family, how could they not hold her tightly? However, the truth often surprised people. Suli was indeed from the Su family. She was the 7th branch of the Su family. However, her parents were only the lowliest servants in the 7th branch of Su family, and they lived in a small yard similar to a mortal farmhouse. Closing her eyes, all kinds of warmth in the small yard with her adoptive parents emerged in her mind. The pictures were so clear as if they happened yesterday. After a long time, Suli opened her eyes. The fluctuation in her eyes faded away, and a trace of sarcasm leaked from the corner of her mouth. 2,000 years. Oh, cultivation is really ruthless. Time could change anything, and she also changed into a person she didn't know. However, everything has its good and bad. Looking at the past from the present perspective, she also saw a lot of news that she couldn't see before. For example, the rope in her hand. How could my lowliest adoptive parents afford such a precious rope to tie a wooden bucket for fetching water? Suli's eyes were gloomy, and more information emerged in her mind. She seemed to be one step closer to the truth of the previous life. The identity of my adoptive parents was told by my adoptive mother in private. I was not a biological parent. After saying this, my parents died accidentally one after another. I was too young to understand at that time, and even the sadness after the death of my adoptive parents soon faded away. Now I think about it, Suli suddenly raised her head. and there seemed to be a flash of blood in her eyes. I was a puppet from the beginning. The so-called arrangement was not from Yushu's sect, but from my birth. Looking at the golden rope in her hand, Suli was silent for a moment, and then snorted coldly. Her white and tender palm exerted force, and the golden silk was brittle and turned into golden powder. Sometimes, it's better to be muddle-headed than clear-headed, Suli slowly exhaled. The face of the kind master in her mind was blurred for a moment, but it soon became clear. She wouldn't panic because of a little speculation. Suli inhaled the cool and moist air in her chest and abdomen. She stood up and walked to the front of the house. She gently pushed the door open, and the smell of decay came to her face. The furnishings in the house were simple. There was nothing except a pair of tables used for memorial services. Although the 2 tablets on the table were made of excellent materials, they couldn't stand the decay of time. The characters were so modeled that they couldn't be seen clearly. But Suli still remembered the names of the 2 people. Su Chui and Su Erniu were both servant names randomly chosen by the Su family. Suli smiled. Now she thought that if she was really the biological daughter of the 2 people, her name would probably be like Su Xiaohong. Why didn't she notice such a big flaw? Was she really stupid in the previous life? Suli seriously thought about this question, and the answer was probably that she didn't want to think too much. Adoptive father, adoptive mother. After 1,000 years, I'm back again. Suli softly murmured. She touched the universe ring with her finger, took out the new tablets and burning incense, and put them in. Then she bowed 3 times. 1,000 years ago, she was about to open the reincarnation mirror and came back secretly once. Iyun Yard had always been her private yard. This was a tacit agreement between her and the 7th branch of the Su family. However, following her death, this agreement was abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. Not only that, the 7th branch of the Su family seemed to be proud of this and used her small yard as an important banquet venue. After I die, do you still want to take advantage of me? Su Li's smile became cold, and her eyes flashed with cold light. No one knew what she was thinking. An hour later, Su Li personally cleaned the house and repaired the small vegetable garden. Then she left the small yard and closed the door again. This time, she had a lot of insights in matrix circle cultivation, which was close to the level of the 10th grade of Grandmaster. There were no more than 3 people in the entire Zhuzhou region who could open this yard. Maybe the next time she came here would be many years later. Chapter 407. On the quiet path, Su Li saw that the gate of the courtyard was completely covered by the tactical matrix and finally restored to its original appearance. Then she turned around and was about to leave. Suddenly, a burst of footsteps mixed with a man's voice came. In the farther place, there was a light and almost inaudible footstep. 2 groups of people? Su Li fixed her eyes and didn't avoid them. She waited for them quietly. Not long after, 2 young men in the costumes of the Su family came side by side. They seemed to be in their 20s. Their faces were pink and white, their feet were weak, and they smelled of alcohol. Su Li frowned. She thought that she could test them, but she didn't expect that they were just 2 idiots. She turned around and was about to leave. The 2 childs of the Su family were lustful. Seeing Su Li's petite and lovely appearance, they didn't want to let her go. After seeing her move, they immediately rushed to stop in front of Su Li. One of the long-faced young men smiled and pretended to be surprised. Oh. Whose sister is she? She is so beautiful. Why don't you go to the central hall? Instead, you come to such a remote place. Are you lost? Su Li didn't speak. The obscure pneuma that she had sensed before was not far behind the 2. Seeing this, the other slightly shorter young man couldn't restrain himself. He leaned over and said with his eyes glowing, "Little beauty, it's fate that we can meet here. Why don't you let us send you off? Hey, the wonderful taste of being a woman. Little beauty, you must have not tasted it." Before they finished their words, the two men were tempted. They didn't give way and directly rushed to Su Li's body. Su Li shook her head and took a step back gently. The two men failed to rush and staggered. If they didn't have a little cultivation, they would have fallen down. Presumptuous. You are just a maid. You dare to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. I will let you taste my power. The two young men were full of alcohol. Their faces were full of lust. They suddenly became angry out of shame and waved their hands to slap Su Li's cheek. Stop! At this moment, a clear shout came from behind the two men, followed by two fierce palm winds, which slapped their backs fiercely. Ah! Ah! The two idiots screamed miserably as they were sent flying. They crawled for a long time before they could get up. After they stood up, they saw the silhouette of the person's swaying footsteps. Their half-sobered wine immediately evaporated. 777. The long-faced young man's eyes widened and he stuttered for a long time without calling out the person's complete name. In the end, due to excessive fear, her eyes rolled back and she fainted in happiness. The short young man wanted to cry but had no tears. He knelt down in a cowardly manner and said in a panic, "Seventh miss, please spare my life. This disciple drank too much." Normally, this disciple would never bully men or rape women. Su Yoshing's cold eyes were full of anger. She snorted and waved her sleeves, saying, "Take them away and hand them over to the torture room for investigation. If they have bad behavior, punish them to the chores room for a good education." No. Spare me, seventh young lady. Spare me. The short young man felt dizzy and immediately begged for mercy. But until he was dragged away by the steward and his voice disappeared in the courtyard, Su Yoshing's expression did not soften at all. The face of the Su family is really lost by this kind of person. Xiaoyu, who served on the side, said angrily. Su Yoshing's beautiful eyes flashed a trace of helplessness when she heard that. She knew how dirty the Su family was, but it was a pity that she couldn't change all this with her strength. Sighing softly, Su Yoshing walked to Su Li and squatted down. Looking at the cold expression on the delicate and tender face, which was completely different from that of the girls of the same age, she couldn't help but be curious. However, she had seen people who were born indifferent. She didn't think too much at the moment and just comforted her in a warm voice, "Sorry, little sister. I scared you. What's your name?" Su Li was silent. Looking at the familiar face in front of her, a trace of imperceptible light flashed through her pupils. Although it was different from her childhood, she still recognized it. Fifth sister. Su Yoshing didn't know what was going on. She thought that Su Li was too scared to speak, so she wanted to comfort her again. At this time, she suddenly saw Su Li look up behind her, and then slowly said, "Are you Su Yoshing?" "Ha!" Su Yoshing was stunned and frowned slightly. She hesitated and said, "Do you know me?" She had hardly gone out in the past 1,000 years. Although the tone of the little girl in front of her was very mature, she was clearly more than 10 years old, and her bone age was less than 100 years old. What was going on? Su Yoshing was still shocked and doubtful. Suddenly, she saw Su Li's lips curled up. The familiar curve made her heart beat faster. "My name is Su Li, fifth sister. 1,000 years is not a long time. Don't you know me now?" Su Li smiled indifferently, "Then I will be sad." At this moment, Su Yoshing was completely stunned and speechless for a long time. Sister, was it really my sister? All kinds of scenes in the illusion flashed in front of her eyes. From the childhood to the disheveled child, even if it was only 4 or 5 years, she enjoyed the love from her sister every moment in those years. Even when she returned to Qingshui's circle, all the memories came back, and the memory of that life became clearer. In the illusion that no one remembered the past, she was abandoned as soon as she was born. Her father didn't love her, and her mother didn't love her. They all regarded her as a burden. Only her sister. Even if she was in a difficult situation, she still took good care of her. Sister, tears gradually filled her eyes. Su Yoxing's nose was sour. She looked at Su Li and was about to say something. Suddenly, she remembered something and suddenly looked back. However, he saw that everyone had fallen into a state where they seemed to be asleep. At this time, Su Yoxing remembered that Su Li had looked back just now. She looked back and saw Su Li's familiar eyes. She couldn't help but smile through tears. How can I forget my sister? I have been thinking about you carefully these years. Sometimes I even fantasize that my sister is still living in a corner of Qingshui Circle. I didn't expect it to come true. Am I dreaming? Su Yoxing said and blinked her eyes. In front of others, she could be mature and could be a cold and arrogant 7th Miss of the Su family. But in front of Su Li, she just wanted to be a younger sister who followed her sister forever. Su Li looked at Su Yoxing, and a strange feeling rose in her heart. The power of reincarnation mirror was really terrible. Everyone had clearly got out of the illusion and sobered up, but they still couldn't let go of the fetters in that dream. Even herself, 2 figures flashed through Su Li's heart. She sighed secretly. When she looked up, her eyes flashed. She pinched Su Yoxing's cheek with her small hand and said softly, "This is not a dream. You have seen my current strength. It will take a while to recover." Su Yoxing touched her face, and the real touch made her happy. But when she heard Su Li's words, she became serious and said, "I see. Sister, you can have a good rest in a yard. I will find elixirs for recovery. Now your identity is sensitive. Don't expose it in case." Su Li smiled and said carelessly, "It seems that you know a lot." Su Yoxing shook her head and smiled bitterly, "Maybe I was kept in the dark before, but now. Sister, you must listen to me. There are too many enemies in Jojo region." Su Li chuckled and walked to Su Yoxing's side. She looked at the central hall, which was brightly lit and faintly heard, maybe, not only Jojo region. Su Yoxing's heart sank and she said helplessly, "Sister, you have guessed it. Do you still dare to mess around? It doesn't matter." Su Li raised her hand, and a sense of vicissitudes appeared on her immature face. She said with emotion, "Some things can't be avoided, and don't need to be avoided. So, why not make the first move?" "Here we go again." Su Yoxing rubbed her eyebrows. In the illusion, her sister always said something she couldn't understand. She didn't expect that in reality, even with thousands of years of experience, she was still the same. "Well, you will know my affairs later. You are the protagonist tonight. Go." Su Li looked back and smiled. She patted Su Yoxing's shoulder gently, "I hope that one day in the future, you can manage the Su family for me." Su Yoxing didn't understand the hidden meaning in Su Li's words. She nodded solemnly, "Sister, I will try my best." Starting from the 7th Miss. A moment later, Su Yoxing personally escorted Su Li to an inaccessible place outside a yard, and then returned. Su Li looked at her back, with extreme warmth and absolute calmness in her eyes. "Sheng, I hope you are not on the wrong side." While whispering to himself, black lotus ring appeared between his fingers. He tooted and said, "Little Su Li, I think that girl is sincere to you. Aren't you afraid that she will be disappointed if she knows it later? Maybe she will be disappointed, and I will make it up to her. Suli rubbed the lotus surface of Black Lotus ring with her fingertips, and her eyes were gloomy, but in this life, I can't make any mistakes. Black Lotus was stunned and couldn't help but be speechless. That's true. At this moment, in the atrium of Iyun Yard, Qing Weiyue sat in the guest seat, drinking and watching the elders of Su family coming and going around. After the initial uneasiness faded, he now hoped to get in touch with Su family as soon as possible and finish the task Su Li gave him. Coming. The new 7th Miss is coming. After 3 rounds of drinking, Qing Weiyue finally saw Su Yuxing. Of course, he didn't know the relationship between his grand elder and Su Yuxing. He just sighed in his heart and envied the talent. Then he calmed down and continued to wait for the call from the seniors of Su family. Come on, let's have a toast to 7th Miss Su Yuxing. Cheers! Congratulations to Miss Su Yuxing for her good fortune from now on, and her cultivation road is unimpeded. Cheers! Thank you so much, fellow practitioners. Su Yuxing said with a smile, but she was still thinking about where Su Li was at the moment. Fortunately, there was no substantive content in this promotion banquet, and no one made trouble. Soon it was over, and she could leave in advance. At the same time, Qing Weiyue finally saw an elder of Su family with 3 pairs of suns and moons embroidered on his chest coming to him. Are you Ning Dawei, who came to discuss something important with Meng's sect? Chapter 408. Qing Weiyue's heart tightened, but he smiled and stood up with hands folded. I'm Qing Weiyue of Meng's sect. Nice to meet you, elder of Su family. Hearing that, the elder frowned at once. Seeing that, Qing Weiyue said again, I heard that the more patterns of the sun and moon on the chest of an elder of the Su family, the more honorable his status is. You must be highly respected in the Su family. I'm deeply honored. The compliment made the elder of Su family very happy, and his eyebrows relaxed. He said slowly, I'm Su Mengqing, the 7th branch of Su family. Qing Weiyue was surprised, you are 2nd elder Su Mengqing. I've heard a lot about you. As soon as he said that, Su Mengqing's expression became even more relaxed. He chuckled and said, it's just an empty reputation. Come with me. Yes, sir. Qing Weiyue followed him immediately and felt relieved. He didn't expect that it was so easy to fool him. But he also understood that Meng's sect was just a small role for Su family. As long as the person could explain the situation of Ni sect, it didn't matter who came. In their eyes, Ning Dawei and I are just nonentities. While mocking himself, Qing Weiyue followed Su Mengqing through the room to the south of the central hall and came to the assembly hall at the back of Iyun Yard. Stepping into the hall, the noise faded away and was replaced by silence. Qing Weiyue's eyes flashed, and he saw the talisman of the soundproof tactical matrix engraved on the door frame. He glanced around the hall quietly and saw many lords and elders of small sects sitting in it. He quickly sorted out his thoughts in his mind. After checking everything, he was slightly relaxed. After some polite greetings with Su Mengqing, he chose a seat and sat down, waiting. On the other side, Su Mengqing came to the side hall, and the smile on his face disappeared immediately. What's wrong, Mengqing? In the side hall, a well-dressed middle-aged practitioner with a proud and dignified demeanor came. He seemed to be in his 30s, but his real age was over 2,000 years old. Su Mengqing came to himself and saw the middle-aged man whose pneuma was as unfathomable as a deep pool. He quickly bowed and saluted, head. This person was the controller of the 7th branch of Su family, Su Yuanhai. In those days, Su Yuanhai was also the top talent of Su family. After 2,000 years of ups and downs, the power of Su family finally fell into his hands hundreds of years ago. You don't look right. What happened? Su Yuanhai came over. Although he looked peaceful, he gave Su Mengqing a strong sense of oppression. Su Mengqing lowered his head subconsciously and said, "It's a little weird." It was Ning Dawei who contacted us before and promised that he would come to discuss how to deal with NI sect. But this time, it was not Ning Dawei, but an elder named Qing Weiyue. Su Yuanhai remained calm and waved his hand gently. A cold young man in black immediately came out from the side hall. People from the main house's dark hall. Su Mingqing's pupils shrank. The indifferent young man had come close and bowed to Su Yuanhai without saying anything. Su Yuanhai also knew the temperament of the young man, so he asked directly, "Is there anything unusual in Meng sect recently? Do you know a man named Qing Weiyue?" "Lord, please wait a moment," the young man in black said lightly. He quickly took out a carrier rune and finished inscribing it. Then he waved his hand and injected spiritual power into it. The carrier rune immediately disappeared into the nothingness. Only 10 minutes later, another carrier rune escaped from the nothingness. The indifferent young man handed it to Su Yuanhai without looking at it and turned away. Su Mengqing was a little embarrassed to see the people from the main house's dark hall being rude to the Lord. Su Yuanhai waved his hand carelessly and threw the carrier rune to Su Mengqing. Su Mengqing scanned it with his divine awareness and suddenly said in surprise, "Ning Dawei is dead. Now Qing Weiyue is the new lord. This is also..." Su Yuanhai nodded. Qing Weiyue secretly controlled the weird book matrix of Meng sect. It is not surprising that Ning Dawei lost to him. But to be cautious, we still need to test him. Did you show any flaws just now? Su Mengqing shook his head quickly. No. In order to numb him, I was even quite friendly to him. If there is any trick, he will definitely give himself away when we test him suddenly. Very well, I will do it myself. The matter of NI sect can't be delayed. Su Yuanhai's eyes were deep. If we can't even take down a small force, how can the seventh branch of Su family raise our heads in front of other branches? The night was dark and deep into the night. In the assembly hall, Qing Weiyue, who didn't know the approaching danger, finally saw a group of high-level officials of Su family, headed by Su Yuanhai, coming from the side hall after a long wait. For a moment, the hall, which was full of whispers, suddenly became so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. Su Yuanhai walked to the seat in the middle and sat down. He laughed loudly and said, "Thank you for coming. Except for the elder of Meng sect, most of you are old friends. I will make a long story short. Today's late-night meeting is for NI sect." As soon as he said this, many people's eyes changed and secretly thought, as expected. The death of Su Zini had been spread. Some people had long guessed that Su family would deal with NI sect, and now it came true. But before that, I have a question. Su Yuanhai said this with a smile, and his meaningful eyes fell on Qing Weiyue. In the next moment, everyone's eyes were focused on him. Qing Weiyue's heart thumped, and his expression changed slightly. But he was still calm. He stood up and held his hands. "Seventh master of Su family, what can I do for you?" "It's fine if you want to teach me." Su Yuanhai's smile faded, "But I am a little curious." Ning Dawei promised to come in person to show his sincerity. Why did an elder come at the last moment? Is my Su family not worth mentioning in the eyes of Meng sect? Qing Weiyue's forehead was covered with sweat instantly, and his mind was in a mess. Was he suspected? Or was he really angry at Meng sect's rudeness? How should he deal with it? Qing Weiyue took a deep breath slowly, and recalled what Su Li said in his mind. "Calm down. If you want to deceive others, you have to deceive yourself first, understand? Deceive myself. If I were the new lord of Meng's sect, what should I say at this moment? Qing Weiyue's scattered eyes gradually became spirited. After a few breaths, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Su Yuanhai's eyes, saying in a low voice, "Forgive me, Master Su. Meng's sect did have an accident." "What?" Su Yuanhai raised his eyebrows. "I'd like to hear the details." Qing Weiyue seemed to get into the role, and his body relaxed. He scratched his head and said with embarrassment, "I have always been at odds with Ning Dawei. The accumulated hatred for hundreds of years finally made me unable to bear it, and Ning Dawei. I am not talented, but now I am the new lord of Meng's sect, and I am willing to be an affiliated sect of Su family. I hope Master Su can be generous and forgive me." "I see." Qing Weiyue's words all matched with the information. A trace of doubt in Su Yuanhai's heart faded away, and he asked with interest, "What's your opinion on NI sect?" Qing Weiyue's body shook, and he said righteously, "NI sect is too ambitious, and the next target is very likely to be Meng's sect. I am willing to do my bit to destroy NI sect for Master." "Ha ha ha ha. Your new little old man is interesting. He is calm in the face of danger. He is a talent. But his cultivation is too low." In the tactical matrix for camouflage on the roof of the council hall, Black Lotus couldn't help laughing. Su Li also smiled slightly. "I am also a little surprised. Now I am short of people. As long as he is loyal enough, his cultivation is not a problem." Black Lotus rolled his eyes. "I know you have a lot of celestial stones. Why don't you give some to me?" Su Li said with a faint smile, "Lord Black Lotus doesn't care about those celestial stones. It's better to give them to me." "Little Su Li, you are a bully. You are not a man." The next morning, the east was bright. Qing Weiyue returned to Meng's sect by riding his sword. Looking at the familiar gate wall of Meng's sect, he was so tired that he couldn't help but feel like he was in a dream. "Come to see me when you are back." Hearing Su Li's familiar voice, Qing Weiyue was slightly refreshed. This was not a dream. He flew and landed in front of the hall in the back mountain of Meng's sect. He pinched a small spell to clean the sweat on his body and tidied his clothes. Then he opened the door and walked in. In the dark hall, there were a few candles. On the throne, there was still a familiar and lazy petite figure. Hearing the voice, she opened her eyes, and her pupils were full of breathtaking luster. "Well done." Hearing the cold voice, Qing Weiyue, who was about to report the matter in detail, was suddenly shocked. She knew. "Of course I know. Do you want me to believe you and let you finish my task only by your words? If so, the world of our cultivation circle is too simple." Hearing Su Li's voice, Qing Weiyue was shocked and broke into a cold sweat. He was glad that he didn't have other thoughts from the beginning. However, at the same time, he couldn't help but feel frightened. The council hall was obviously isolated by a big tactical matrix. The Grand Elder didn't go in, but he knew what happened inside. The so-called supernatural power was nothing more than this. "Well, you are shocked a lot, and you will be rewarded a lot. Let's talk about their plan first." Hearing Su Li's words, Qing Weiyue came to his sense and felt strange. "Since the Grand Elder knows, I want to hear it from your mouth." Su Li interrupted Qing Weiyue, and Qing Weiyue immediately stopped talking. After a while, he told her the plan discussed last night. An hour later, Qing Weiyue walked out of the palace, wiped the cold sweat on his head, and smiled bitterly. But when he saw the universe ring in his hand, he couldn't help but feel excited and left happily. In the hall, Su Li was half lying on the throne, with one hand supporting her earlobe, and the other hand holding the jade slip map left by Qing Weiyue. Her eyes were changing, and her thoughts were tumbling. Tsangjin Valley. This name is very strange. Does it appear after my death? 3 days, I'd like to see how your Su family will lure me into the trap. Chapter 409. 3 days later, in the hall of the Lord of Ni sect. Su Li played with the small disc that took her 3 days to refine. Hua Yan looked at it and was quite worried. She couldn't help but ask, Li, can this thing really deal with the scheme of the 7th branch of Su family? They have gathered dozens of small sects to ambush you. You have to be careful. Don't worry. Su Li clenched her fist, put away the disc, and raised her eyes slightly. Hua Yan couldn't help but look outside. As expected, First Elder just entered the hall. He walked to the center of the hall and saluted, Grand Elder, Lord, Elder Qing Weiyue of Meng sect is here to see you. He finally comes. Hua Yan took a deep breath and said, send my order. Let him in. The great elder respectfully responded, bowed, and retreated. At this moment, facing an unprecedentedly strong enemy, he was calm and didn't panic when he saw the petite girl sitting on the stage. He didn't need to pretend. He flew to Qing Weiyue, who was still outside the gate of Ni sect, raised his head slightly, and said coldly with a hint of vigilance, please come in. Lord is waiting for you in the hall. Qing Weiyue nodded and followed First Elder into Ni sect and disappeared. In Tsangjin Valley, people of Su family hid in the dark. A water mirror appeared in the nothingness in front of Su Yuanhai and others. The scene of Qing Weiyue entering the gate of Ni sect was shown in the mirror, and even his voice was transmitted. Head, Qing Weiyue was summoned by Lord of Ni sect. It seems that the news that the Grand Elder of Ni sect is practicing in isolation is true. Su Mengqing spoke first. Su Yuanhai nodded and whispered to himself, in the past year, the disciples of Ni sect have been bullied by Meng sect, but they have no intention to resist. It must be because their Grand Elder is practicing in isolation and lacks confidence. It's a pity that the Chief Steward and others have been in a coma since they came back, and First Elder is not here at this critical moment. Otherwise, why do we have to mobilize so many people? Su Mengqing sighed regretfully. Su Yuanhai glanced at him, and then glanced at the purple-robed elder who didn't seem to hear it. He said softly, we are not at home now. Su Mengqing suddenly woke up and regretted saying the wrong words. But he wondered why the head didn't stop him just now. It seems that family head Su still has some resentment against my Zhenluo group. When Su Mengqing was upset, the old man in the purple robe, who seemed to be unaware of it, suddenly laughed and walked to Su Yuanhai. He continued to say, the fact that your clan's Grand Elder was able to participate in the restoration of the Great Array is something that many array masters yearn for. For example, although I participated in the selection back then, I was eliminated because my array Dao realm was not high enough. Sigh, Su Yuanhai stared at the old man in the purple robe and said slowly. An oppressive pressure spread out. Array Master Shin, there's no need to say any more. I've already heard these words countless times, and I'm already tired of hearing them. Now I just want to know, when will the First Elder of the 7th branch of our Su family come back from Zhenluo group? No matter how trivial and profound a formation was it really necessary to spend 800 years to repair it? Moreover, all the matrix masters in the Zhuzhou region with acceptable realms worked together. Even if it was a 10th grade matrix, it had already been restored. If the soul tablet in the ancestral hall was not broken, Su Yuanhai would have thought that the First Elder of the 7th branch had died. Ho, 7th master of the Su family, please be patient. The old man in the purple robe, who was called Array Master Shin, cupped his hands repeatedly and said humbly and sincerely, in fact, I come to help this time. On the one hand, 7th master of the Su family asked for help from Zhenluo group, and on the other hand, Shenlo Group also wants me to bring some news to Master to appease your irritation. Oh. Su Yuanhai raised his eyebrows. I'd like to hear the details. Master of the Su family also knows that all the people who went to repair the big matrix have not come back. Array Master Shen lowered his voice, and a wave appeared around him, covering the three people. Soundproof Matrix, Su Mengqing, who was standing aside, pricked up his ears slightly. Since Array Master Shen was so cautious, what he said next must be a secret that could not be missed. Yes. Su Yuanhai nodded, but so what? No matter how advanced the 10th grade matrix is, it will never take 800 years. 7th Master of the Su family, you are wrong. Array Master Shen immediately retorted, looking at Su Yuanhai with a serious face and burning eyes. What if the level of the big matrix has already exceeded the 10th grade? Ha! Su Yuanhai's eyes were fixed. Array Master Shen, what do you mean? Array Master Shen's eyes showed a dignified look, and he asked instead of answering, 7th Master of the Su family, you should be familiar with the bloody accident of Samsara, right? Of course, it is a big event that affects the whole Qingshui circle. Anyone in the cultivation circle will know about it. Su Yuanhai said, and suddenly paused with a surprised look, you mean, yes. Array Master Shen's eyes were full of yearning and pity. The big matrix to be repaired is the fragment that fell from the illusion of samsara. I see. Su Yuanhai exclaimed, and the plain phantom in white involuntarily appeared in his mind. He was more than 2,000 years old now, and was of the same generation as Su Li. And he was also in Iyun Yard when he was a child. Brother Yuanhai, thank you for giving me food. Brother Yuanhai, why you can practice and become strong, but I can't. Brother Yuanhai, I have no parents. When you become an immortal flying in the sky, take me away from here, okay? Brother Yuanhai, I am in so much pain. Why did they hurt me? What is in my blood? Su Yuanhai, it turns out that you are the same as the Su family. I will not return to the Su family in the future. Su Yuanhai closed his eyes, trying to calm down the emotions in his childhood. Su Mengqing looked at his master strangely, and consciously did not disturb him. After a long time, Su Yuanhai opened his eyes again. His eyes were calm and indifferent. Looking at the water mirror, Su Li and Qing Weiyue flying out of Ni sect together, he said softly, it's almost time. Let's get ready. In the air to Cangjin Valley, Su Li followed Qing Weiyue's flying sword. Qing Weiyue scanned around with his psychic awareness and found nothing. He was about to talk to Su Li, but was stopped by a voice in his mind. Someone has done something to you. Communicate with me by voice transmission. Qing Weiyue was shocked. Someone had done something to him. When? Why didn't he notice it at all? But since Su Li said so, Qing Weiyue naturally believed her. He transmitted the sound. The Su family and all the other sects are in Cangjin Valley. They didn't tell me what tactical matrix they will use to deal with you. Su Li's eyes flickered. Sure enough, they will use tactical matrix. After so many years, Su Guohong, I hope your tactical matrix realm will not let me down. Thinking of this, she turned over her palm, and a mass of pneuma flashed in her palm. I didn't expect that the Su family would have such a treasure as the understanding grass. In this way, I can advance the second level of Suiyu tactics a lot faster. The bait that Qing Weiyue brought to lure Su Li was undoubtedly the understanding grass. But under the instruction of the Su family, he said that it grew in Cangjin Valley and was guarded by a powerful demon beast. He only had time to intercept a mass of pneuma to prove it. As expected, this understanding grass was in the treasury of the 7th branch of the Su family. Su Li's lips curled up, revealing a fascinating smile. Su Yuanhai, I'm really sorry. Whoosh! Two arcs crossed the sky and were soon seen by the spies outside Songjin Valley. They are coming. Matrix Master Shin waved his hand, and his eyes were full of killing intent. He transmitted the sound, "Everyone, get ready." The lords of small sects hiding everywhere stood in the tactical matrix one after another and injected their own strength. The power of dozens of Jindan realm and Yuanying realm condensed together along the runes, just under Su Yuanhai's feet. The terrifying energy was surging obscurely. Seventh Master of the Su family, the tactical matrix has been completed. You can use the power of the spirit-absorbing tactical matrix to fight against the enemy at any time. Even a practitioner at the peak of Yuanying realm can't bear the power condensed by dozens of Jindan realm and Yuanying realm. Matrix Master Shin said in a tired voice. After all, he was only a high-grade matrix master, not a tactical matrix master. It was quite hard for him to set up such a big tactical matrix. Matrix Master Shin, thank you so much. After this is done, I will reward you handsomely. Su Yuanhai stared at the two people who were slowly descending from the sky. He glanced over Qing Weiyue and only fixed his eyes on the petite girl with an indifferent face. Now is the time for me to use people. If I remember correctly, there is only one illusion arising powder left in the warehouse. The last one was used on Su Li, and this one, Su Yuan. Hi! Before Su Yuanhai finished his wishful thinking, there was a sudden bang in his mind, like a big bell ringing in his ears. He was so shocked that he bled from his 7 orifices and felt dizzy. Master! Su Mengqing turned pale with fright. I'm fine. Su Yuanhai shook his head fiercely. When he looked up in horror, he found that the person was no longer in the air. His heart suddenly sank. He turned around and found nothing. What are you looking for? A ghost-like blurred figure suddenly appeared beside him, with an indescribable teasing tone. Su Yuanhai's hair stood on end. He turned around and retreated, immediately crushing the switch of the spirit-absorbing tactical matrix in his hand. As he flashed away, a small disc fell into the core of the tactical matrix under his feet. It spun and lay flat. When Array Master Shin saw this item, it was as if he had seen a ghost. His eyes were wide open as he shouted at the top of his lungs, "Stop! Don't start the tactical matrix." Hearing Matrix Master Shin's words, Su Yuanhai looked at his empty hands with a bitter face. It's too late. Boom! A huge roar sounded in the Songjin Valley. The smoke was so thick that people couldn't see clearly. Pooh! Pooh! Qing Weiyue spat out the soil in his mouth unexpectedly and tried to see the scene in the valley. Finally, he saw the familiar voice of Su Li coming out. Her white clothes were spotless, and there was no trace of fighting on her body. How on earth did she do it? Qing Weiyue increasingly felt that the girl in front of him was unfathomable. Su Li waved her hand, and the strong wind blew away the thick smoke in the valley. The vision gradually became clear. She waved her hand and smiled, "It's almost time. Let's see what else the 7th master of the Su family wants to say." Qing Weiyue, an old man, looked at Su Li's beautiful side face in the smoke and was stunned for a moment. Chapter 410. Cough, cough. When Qing Weiyue followed Su Li into Songjin Valley, he heard an extremely repressed cough. When the smoke and wind dispersed, the scene that entered his eyes caused him to be extremely speechless. The sect masters of the small forces that had been hiding in the valley were all heavily injured and groaning on the ground. Many of them were even covered in blood and had been hit by the boulders that rolled down from the valley, causing them to lose consciousness. Qing Weiyue was surprised and curious when he thought of the small disc that Su Li threw out before. How could such a small object have such great power? At this moment, Su Li stopped in front of an old man in a purple robe who was leaning against a mountain rock. Cough cough, counter-array disc. Is there really such a thing in this world? Matrix Master Shin ignored his injury and stared at Su Li's face. He tried to recall, but the girl in front of him could not be matched with any Matrix Master he knew. You are from LoveLore Group. Su Li did not answer. She glanced at the unique embroidery of LoveLore Group on the sleeves of the old man, a high-grade Matrix Master. No wonder. Even if Su Guohong is senile, his realm of Matrix Circle will not degenerate so much. Matrix Master Shin blushed and couldn't speak. At the same time, he wondered why Su Li was so familiar with LoveLore Group. Why didn't LoveLore Group know anything about this woman? He was not worried about his own life. He had done his best to help Su Yuanhai. Even if he quit now, Su Yuanhai would not blame him. With the support of LoveLore Group, the Grand Elder of Ni sect in front of him would not kill him unless he was out of his mind. I didn't expect that Su Yuanhai, a wise man, would be defeated by a half-grown child, or, Su Yuanhai's low voice sounded, followed by the sound of stones rolling down. Your Excellency, in order to survive, you possess a child. It is against the harmony of heaven and earth. Su Li turned around and saw Su Yuanhai standing up with his hand on his chest. His mouth was bleeding and he looked at her gloomily. After a moment of silence, she suddenly chuckled. If I were you, I wouldn't choose to use the thing in my hand. From the beginning to the end, you have been plotting against our Ni sect. There is a saying that you reap what you sow, do you understand, family head Su? Su Yuanhai's movement under his sleeves paused for a moment, and he didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, he could feel the boundless pressure coming from his opponent. His intuition told him that if he took the risk, there was a 99% chance that he would fail. The woman in front of him gave him too much pressure. His aura was as obscure as the sea and extremely dangerous, as if he only needed to make a move to take his life in an instant. He's definitely not at the peak of the nascent soul stage. Even if he's not yet a soul formation cultivator, he's not far from it. Thinking of this, Su Yuanhai let out a long sigh and relaxed his body. But he sneered mercilessly, your cultivation is obviously much higher than ours. Even if you don't do anything, you can crush us with your strength alone. Why do you have to resort to such a despicable trick and make us laugh at you? Despicable. Su Li shook her head and couldn't help laughing. The gentle arc on her face suddenly became cold and stern. Stupid guy, don't use these bullshit morals to suppress me. Since there's a shortcut I can take, why must I give up on what's close at hand and seek what's far away? It's simply a waste of my time to fight with you mobs for 300 rounds. You. Su Yuanhai's expression changed slightly, and he took a deep breath, unscrupulous and unconventional. You are a member of the Diabolism. As soon as this remark came out, all the lords who were still lying on the ground and healing silently raised their heads, with deep meaning in their eyes. Everyone has the right to kill the evildoer of the Diabolism. What a big hat. I can't afford to bear it. Su Li raised her eyebrows and said, my Ni sect has been living in a humble place for development, but your Su family insisted on coming to us and said that I am a member of the Diabolism. Do you believe it yourself, Su Yuanhai? Su Yuanhai couldn't say anything when he heard it, because what Su Li said was the truth. At this moment, he even faintly resented Su Zini in his heart. Huajian's sect didn't show its strength and didn't show any threat. It was clearly a hidden sect that wanted to avoid the world. But Su Zini didn't go to the outside world to practice and improve her cultivation. Instead, she poked a hornet's nest. Now she not only died, but also implicated the whole 7th branch of Su family and its affiliated sections. Su Yuanhai got a headache as he thought about it. Seeing the intimidating look in Su Li's eyes getting more and more intense, his pressure increased greatly. Finally, he couldn't help but bow his head and sigh. This time, my Su family admits defeat. There was no other way. The situation was beyond his control. He couldn't die for the seventh branch of Su family, even though his cultivation was supplied by Su family. People were selfish. Su Li curled her lips slightly and turned her eyes to the lords of small forces. She said in a cold tone, "You all heard it. I have something to discuss with the head of Su family. Irrelevant people, get out of here. I will count to 3. If anyone doesn't want to leave, then stay here forever. 1. After Su Li finished the first order, the lords who were lying on the ground moaning got up one by one and fled out of the valley. They ran faster than usual. Even Matrix Master Shin, who was embedded in the stone wall, broke free, smiled at Su Yuanhai, and ran out of the valley. Su Yuanhai's eyes widened. He felt suffocated in his heart and almost vomited blood. A group of useless good-for-nothings only knew how to escape. If they didn't escape, he might have a chance to turn the situation around. Before Su Li finished the second count, all the people in Cangjin Valley had left. Qing Weiyue also retreated to the entrance of the valley with all the seriously injured elders of Su family, keeping a lookout for Su Li. Seeing Qing Weiyue's action, Su Yuanhai reacted at this time and blurted out, "You have already subdued Meng's sect. It seems that you are not too stupid." Su Li's indifferent words made Su Yuanhai speechless. Finally, he sighed deeply, "I didn't lose unjustly. Not only the strength. The possessor in front of him was far above him in both scheming and scheming. How could he defeat such a person?" Su Yuanhai felt a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart. It was impossible. That's all. Next, let's talk about the compensation. Su Li touched the storage ring, and 2 soft seats and a stone table appeared on the ground. There was also a cup of tea on the table, with hot smoke curling up. She sat down slowly, holding her chin, and looked at Su Yuanhai. "Your Su family deceived me to come out of practice and wasted so much time. Have you thought about how to appease my anger?" Su Yuanhai's face darkened, and he wanted to curse in his heart. "I am the one who suffered the most loss." She even wanted compensation. But looking at Su Li's aggressive posture, how could he dare not to compensate? Su Mengqing and others were still in the hands of Qing Weiyue. If he said no, the Grand Elder of Ni sect would directly order to kill them, and then he would really be finished. Compensation. What kind of compensation do you want? As long as you don't pursue this matter, I will promise you all. Su Yuanhai gritted his teeth and said. His heart was bleeding. But at this moment, he still didn't understand what Su Li really meant by compensation. You are very good and know what to do. Su Li slowly picked up the teacup and took a sip. In this case, I won't let you suffer losses. How about making a deal with you? Su Yuanhai suddenly became nervous. Su Li didn't mention the specific compensation, which made him feel a little bad. What deal? It's very simple. Su Li smiled and showed her white teeth. Under the sunlight, they looked a little gloomy in Su Yuanhai's eyes. I won't touch anything of the Su family. But the premise is that the senior members of the 7th branch of the Su family must follow my orders. As soon as Su Li said this, Su Yuanhai immediately stood up from the soft seat with his eyes wide open. That's impossible. Su Li raised her eyebrows. You, Su Yuanhai, just act according to Su Zhao's eyes. Why can't you change your master now? Su Yuanhai sneered. You don't have the slightest concept of blood relationship. How can you say that you are not an evil practitioner? I, Su Yuanhai, will not be so depraved if I acknowledge an evil practitioner as my master. The gentleness on Su Li's face gradually disappeared, and her tone became colder. Surrender or die. You choose one. Then I'd rather die. Su Yuanhai laughed. People like you will never understand the fetters of the family and the affection of the family. You want me to betray the Su family? Forget it. Su Li was silent. She didn't understand. Your father died early, and your mother married another man. You have been alone since you were a child. How can a person like you understand the affection of the family? Your so-called kinship, don't tell me you're talking about your younger sister, when you were young? Su Li's calm tone sounded quietly. The indignation on Su Yuanhai's face, which was full of passion a second ago, seemed to be frozen by time and completely stiffened. Then, it slowly turned into panic and horror. How do you know? I have my own way. Su Li laughed wantonly and looked at Su Yuanhai with cold eyes. Do you want me to continue? How dare you? Shut up. Su Yuanhai looked ferocious. He knelt down in front of Su Li and grabbed his scalp, shouting, What do you know? I don't want to, but I can't stop it at all. I am too weak. So, I want to be stronger. Stronger. Do you know how sad I am every time she is caught to bleed? You have no idea. Looking at Su Yuanhai's madness, Su Li caught the meaning of his words, and her eyes gradually became strange. Bleed. She was bled when she was a child. Why didn't she remember it at all? Hey, little Su Li, there is something wrong with this guy. Tut. He even begins to hurt himself. It seems that he has a deep mental barrier. Black Lotus appeared and seemed to be watching the fun. Su Li frowned tightly. Seeing that Su Yuanhai was about to bite off his hands, she finally knocked him out with a palm. Her expression was a little uncertain. She had too many puzzles to solve. Who could solve them for her? Su Shao. He was the strongest practitioner in Su family and one of the 6 Huashan realms in the entire Zhuzhou region. If she wanted to get the information from him, she must appear as the winner above him. In the final analysis, I am still too weak. If I have the cultivation of Huashan realm now, it is enough to sweep across the Zhuzhou region. It will not be so difficult to know the layout of those mighty figures on me. Su Li thought in her mind. She picked up the fainted Su Yuanhai and was about to go out. Suddenly, Black Lotus's surprised and uncertain voice sounded. Chapter 411. Little Su Li, don't go in a hurry. Su Li stopped and looked at the ring. What's wrong? Hee, I seem to have found something incredible. Follow my guidance. Black Lotus Ring said with a hint of excitement. Su Li's eyes flickered. Even when she got the treasures of the entire Zhonglei's cave last time, Black Lotus was shocked at most, but he was never as happy as now. Treasures that are beneficial to his recovery. Su Li thought for a while and turned to the depths of the valley, following the guidance. Along the way, the nearby mountain walls were bare, and there were only yellow loess and black stones. There was not even a little green, let alone any gold mine. Cangjin Valley. Su Li didn't know who named it. Su Li's footsteps were natural and casual, but her psychic awareness had quietly spread out, alert to the unknown dangers around. After walking for about 10 minutes, there was an inexplicable mist in the valley. The deeper she went, the more unclear it was. Even her psychic awareness was limited to a radius of 30 meters around her. Tactical matrix. Su Li's fingers held a wisp of mist, and her expression finally became serious. It's really weird. Black Lotus rolled his eyes. So you didn't believe me at all? The 7th grade tactical matrix is not very difficult to break. Sensing the level of the tactical matrix, Su Li relaxed her eyebrows. After calculating with her fingers, she stretched out her hand and pointed in the nothingness. After a while, the lines hidden in the tactical matrix appeared, and gradually disappeared under Su Li's means. At the moment when the lines completely disappeared, the white mist that shrouded the valley seemed to be alive. After tumbling for a moment, it completely disappeared as if it was blown away by the wind. When her eyes and ears were clear, the coverage of Su Li's psychic awareness returned to the usual size of 100 meters. When she saw the scene that appeared in her psychic awareness, her eyes slightly condensed, and she quickly flew out before Black Lotus urged. Close, close. It's really that kind of treasure, huh? Black Lotus couldn't suppress his ecstasy, but Su Li turned a deaf ear to him. She landed softly and stopped in front of a stone gate covered with moss. No one has been here for at least 1,000 years. Su Li stepped forward and raised her hand to wipe the moss away, revealing the original lines on the stone gate. It was a circular pattern that depicted a coffin. Like a seal, it was deeply engraved on the stone door. It seemed to be the unique mark of a certain sect or clan. I think I've seen it somewhere before. It's very familiar, but I can't remember it. Su Li frowned deeply again, thinking of what Su Yuanhai had said before. Have my memories ever been lost? What's missing? Why did those manipulators erase a part of her memory but not kill her? Su Li was speechless. At this moment, she was slightly perplexed. All sorts of incomprehensible mysteries seemed to indicate that it was absolutely not an easy task for her to investigate the karma of her past life. Even her monstrous body in this life might not be able to withstand it. What are you thinking? Little Su Li, go in and have a look. If this king recovers, who cares what kind of monsters or demons they are, there's only one word, kill and be done with it. Hearing Black Lotus's mean voice, Su Li suddenly came back to her senses. She shook her head, pushed open the stone door and walked in. TSK, who exactly did this girl offend in her previous life? This mark doesn't look too good, a sigh echoed in the space of Black Lotus ring, but it didn't go out of the ring and fell into Su Li's ears. After entering the stone door, Su Li's sight was dark, but it didn't affect her to see the road clearly. Glancing at the end of the stone path not far away, Su Li lowered her eyes slightly and sniffed. It was a pitch-black hole that seemed to devour people. It was very wet here. But after integrating the divine thunder of water, she was very sensitive to the property of water. It was very dry here. Where did the wetness come from? It's not wetness. It's the gloomy feeling of the ghosts produced after the soul was broken. But your soul has been tempered, so the feeling is not very strong. If an ordinary practitioner came here, he would definitely feel scared and see ghosts. Black Lotus explained, and his voice became dignified, this place is most suitable for ghost clan and ghost practitioners to practice, and their pneuma can be perfectly hidden in the environment. You have to be careful. Su Li's mind was slightly tense. In other words, Black Lotus couldn't be sure whether there was a strong enemy hiding in this stone cave. It's suitable for Ghost Clan to practice, so I have the body of evil ghost. Su Li's eyes flickered, and she stepped forward silently. Soon she passed the stone cave door, and a special smell of decay came to her face. It was desolate, and this was a forgotten area. There's no one here. Su Li relaxed her eyebrows, and Black Lotus couldn't help but be surprised, even I can't perceive it. How do you know? The smell of death is very strong. Su Li walked slowly, and a faint black halo appeared under her feet. She observed the empty and silent surroundings, and said, if there were living people, the smell of death would have been dissolved by vitality, and it wouldn't be so strong as to be substantial. I see. Black Lotus clicked his tongue. He was a spirit without flesh and blood, so it was naturally difficult to perceive the smell of death. When the master and the servant were talking, Su Li suddenly made a light sound under her feet. The sound echoed in the empty cave, which seemed a bit gloomy. Suli stopped, squatted down, picked up the thing that was trampled, and looked at it carefully. Is this a broken piece of porcelain? Suli looked at the broken arc-shaped thing on both sides in her hands, which didn't look like a human bone. This place didn't seem to be inhabited, and it was strange that there were broken pieces of porcelain. Suli frowned and thought for a moment, and then she put away the broken pieces of porcelain and continued to walk inside. After a short walk, she suddenly stopped, and her expression was slightly serious, and even her breathing slowed down. What did you see? Black Lotus was also affected by her, and his voice was low. But in his perception, there was nothing in front of Suli except a square outline. Suli didn't answer. She waved her sleeves gently, and the wind blew the dust and debris away. The square outline in front of her gradually became clear. After a quarter of an hour, the dust and debris piled up into a hill, and a square pool appeared in front of Suli. Or it could be said that it was originally a pool, but it was filled with dust because of the long time. In the pool, square stone pillars stood very orderly. According to the height, it could be seen that when it was used at that time, the things placed on the top of the stone pillars should not be above the pool water, and they were nourished in the pool. So many stone pillars, there are hundreds of them. What were they used for at that time? Black Lotus asked doubtfully. Although he had lived for a long time, he didn't know much about the human clan. Especially after so many years of evolution in the cultivation era, many new things appeared. Suli was still silent. She squatted down to pick up the fragments that had not been swept away, and took out the broken pieces of porcelain that had been put away before. The same material, this. Is it a kiln place? Black Lotus's tone became more and more strange. It's not a rare thing to make porcelain. Why do they have to make it so hidden? What if it is the life ring? Suli's voice suddenly sounded, and Black Lotus's tone suddenly stagnated. He was surprised and doubtful. You mean? Suli slowly stood up. 9 out of 10, this is a secret place where the life ring was stored. No wonder there are so many broken pieces of porcelain. Black Lotus didn't say anything. How many talents from the outside world did Suli trap and kill in the reincarnation mirror? The number was definitely no less than 30,000. Although he didn't know that almost all the talents were killed by Lingli and Fang Yuan, the number was already terrible. After all, they were talents. Generally speaking, on average, a secular city in Qingshui Circle had more than 1,000 qualified children, and among these 1,000, no more than 100 could really embark on the road of cultivation. However, there were less than 1 in 100 cultivators. How rare was that? In each generation of practitioners in Zhejiu region, there would be no more than 5 talents. In the reincarnation mirror, 100,000 talents died at once. Talents of the same generation as Suli were basically all dead, and those who survived were all disciples of holy sects. I think the situation here at that time should be very spectacular. Suli sighed slightly, seeming to be a little regretful that she didn't see the scene where the life ring was broken together. Black Lotus's scalp was a little numb, and his voice became cautious. Suli, go to find the crystal shaped like a black gem. It should be in this cave. Black stone. Suli raised her eyebrows and spread out her psychic awareness, but only saw broken pieces of porcelain and worthless dust and rocks. Where is the black stone crystal? How to find it? Puff, Black Lotus couldn't help laughing. How can psychic awareness find things like the soul stone? Of course, I look for it with my eyes. Little Suli, you are really funny, ha ha ha. Suli clenched the Black Lotus ring, and the electric arc flickered between her fingers. Her eyes became dangerous. Did you tell me it was the soul stone? Ha! No, master, I was wrong. Black Lotus was terrified at once, and said in a very obedient voice. Su Li was not like the time when she had just been reborn, and she could only threaten him with death. Now, the divine thunder of water was enough to threaten him, and he didn't want to taste the taste of electric shock. It's good that you know you are wrong. The electric arc between Su Li's fingers disappeared. Tell me, what is the soul stone? What else can it be? Of course, it is a treasure used to strengthen the soul. Black Lotus muttered in a low voice, feeling wronged, but the information was revealed to Su Li without any mistake. The conditions for the production of the soul stone are very harsh. It can only be produced in a place with extremely strong soul power. But since it used to be the place where the life ring was stored, it is reasonable to produce the soul stone. The soul stone is only useful to the ghost clan. When the ghost clan is not extinct, the human clan may be interested in this place and dig out the soul stone and sell it to the ghost clan. But now, tut, no one cares about it. What's the use of it for me? Su Li asked directly after hearing it. You will know when you find one. Black Lotus kept her guessing, but Su Li didn't care. She began to search around the pool inch by inch. The search was not as difficult as she imagined. After a while, a black crystal the size of a fingernail appeared in Su Li's palm. The surface was glowing with a deep luster. It seemed that if she stared at it for a long time, even her soul would be sucked in by the crystal. Black Lotus, you have wasted so much of my time. If you don't give me a reason, the electric arc flashed between Su Li's fingers. Black Lotus, who had a greedy face, shrank his neck and wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 4:12. After a while, under the careful guidance of Black Lotus, Su Li finally figured out the role of the soul stone. Since the soul stone was bred with the power of the soul, its effect was naturally related to the soul. Whether for the spirit of a treasure like Black Lotus or for practitioners of Ghost Clan, it was extremely difficult to recover if the soul was obliterated, and the soul stone was exactly the magic treasure to recover the soul. In addition, the soul stone could also improve the comprehension and speed up the practice of the secret method of soul. A long time ago, when Ghost Clan was strong, there was a soul hall made of soul stones in their base camp, which was used to reward clansmen for healing and enlightenment. It used to be the place that every Ghost Clan yearned for. Now, Ghost Clan was exterminated, so there was no such place. Su Li blinked and asked, you also said that the human clan and the ghost clan are essentially humanoid creatures. Can this soul stone restore the souls of the human clan? Su Li looked at Black Lotus Ring and thought that there would be a fierce rebuttal, but she didn't expect that there was silence. After a long time, Black Lotus's slightly heavy voice sounded slowly. Yes, it's the same in essence. Human clan can use it, but they can't. Why? Nonsense. Ghost clan has been exterminated. Where can human clan get the secret method to refine the soul stone? Refining indiscriminately will kill people. Black Lotus's tone seemed a little irritable, as if he recalled some bad memories. Seeing this, Su Li stopped irritating him and continued to look for the soul stone. Such a nail-sized soul stone was not enough for her to practice the secret method of soul tactics, which she got by chance. I was worried that the progress of soul tactics was slow and incomprehensible, and I was delayed by refining the cave, so I couldn't worry about it. The soul stone is a timely rain. After making up her mind, Su Li's method of looking for the soul stone became more thorough. Every piece of land in the cave was dug more than 3 feet by her, and she didn't let go of any clues. This secluded place where the life ring was stored was not small, and the speed of searching by sight was extremely limited. But this matter must be kept secret, and Su Li had no other way. It took Su Li a month to search the secluded place. During this period, She went out once to send Su Yuanhai and others to Ni sect as guests, and then returned to continue. When the people who stayed in the base camp of Su family received the news, they thought that the head of Su family went to seize the spoils of war, while the lords of various sects who fled back announced that they would practice in isolation. Although the people of Su family felt a little strange, they didn't think much when they thought that the head of Su family had subdued Ni sect. 3656. Su Li looked at the last soul stone the size of a grain of rice that she dug out from the deep soil in her palm and sighed slightly. It's too little. Even though there were 3,000 of them, every single one of the soul stones was extremely fragmented. If all the soul stones were gathered together, they would only be the size of a palm. Don't sigh. I saw the amount of broken porcelain you found. The total number of broken life rings here is less than 10,000. It's already a miracle that you can breed a palm-sized soul stone. What more do you want? Black Lotus said snappily, I haven't seen a soul stone since the ghost clan was destroyed. Why are you so lucky? People can't die in the reincarnation mirror. It would be strange if you could see a soul stone. Su Li retorted lightly. Black Lotus was so angry that he almost choked to death. Damn it, why did he find that Su Li became more and more impolite to him since she got the divine thunder of water? No. When did this girl ever be polite to him? Black Lotus felt wronged as he thought about it. As he thought about it, he almost burst into tears. Who did he offend? Who was the big boss who had lived for 10,000 years? It was not easy for him to wake up, but he met such a black-bellied and cunning master. It was really, Qi Xianqing, you'd better be alive. Otherwise, where can I find you to get even with? Black Lotus said bitterly in his heart, but his eyes were staring at the fragment in Su Li's hand with passion. He almost drooled. Master, how about we make a deal? Su Li glanced at the pocket-sized shadow that was about to come out of the ring with a faint smile. What's the deal? Seeing that there was a chance, Black Lotus's tone suddenly became more enthusiastic. Master, think about it. I believe that even if I can't compete for the first place in the ranking of ancient treasures, I will never fall out of the top 3. As long as I recover fast enough, Master, with my assistance, your cultivation will be able to rise rapidly and reach the realm of immortals. Why do you still need to worry about practicing resources? Su Li raised her eyebrows and thought about it. Black Lotus didn't know that he seemed to have spilled the beans, and continued to say, if I didn't remind you this time, you must have missed the soul stone. As long as you give me half, no, a quarter, I still have a precious swordsmanship of the body refining school. After you master it, you will be able to kill God and Buddha. At this time, Black Lotus finally found that there was something wrong with Su Li's eyes. He gradually lost his confidence and his voice gradually disappeared. He tried to recall what he said before, but he didn't think there was anything wrong. Fortunately, he didn't have to think about it soon. The top 3 treasures. Su Li supported her chin with one hand and looked at Black Lotus ring, which made Black Lotus's scalp numb. Why didn't I see it at all? Since my rebirth, you seem to have taught me nothing but the common sense of ancient cultivation and a pirated Sueyu tactics. From the first hurdle of Lianqi realm to the 18th hurdle, it all depends on my personal luck. Black Lotus, how much effect did your mouth play? You don't offer the cultivation methods in your hands to master for practice, but hide them and wait for the critical moment to snatch the practicing resources from me. This time it is a school of swordsmanship. Is it possible that next time it will be a school of boxing or saber? I have been wondering. Black Lotus, you boast of your high status and don't take the reincarnation mirror seriously. I originally thought that you were just boasting, but now I kind of understand. Black Lotus looked at Su Li blankly and was stunned for a while. Who am I? Where am I? I just want some soul stones to restore my spiritual body. How can I become a selfish, shameless, and despicable person? Little girl, are you crazy? In the space of the ring, Black Lotus slapped himself twice and cursed loudly. While scolding, Black Lotus couldn't help thinking. Why do I still feel that what this girl said is a little reasonable? I seem to be really selfish. There are so many secret methods and fighting methods in my head, but except for the all-spirits tactics, it seems that it really has no contribution. Even the complete version of the secret records of Black Lotus was finally found by Suli herself. Hiss. It's too much. Black Lotus pondered and hesitated whether he should give the swordsmanship to Suli without the soul stones to let her calm down. Suli looked at the silent Black Lotus ring and slightly hooked her lips. She turned into a stream of light and left the valley. Before leaving, she collapsed the secluded land. She didn't want to leave any flaws. If the first hurdle of the soul tactics is really what I understand, the matter of the Su family will be much easier. While muttering, Suli rose into the air and disappeared. Before she disappeared, the ring of reincarnation mirror on her waist shook slightly, revealing a little beast phantom. If Suli noticed it, she would find that the little beast was staring at Black Lotus ring with a gloating look. Idiot, you are the ghost Lotus supremacy who is more than 30 places higher than me. How can you be fooled by the ancient supreme treasure? Bah! You are a disgrace to our supreme treasure. The little beast's pupils were deep. It turned its head to look at Suli, who didn't feel it at all. A strange look appeared in its eyes, which contained some inexplicable covetousness and fear. The daughter of destiny who was forcibly created by that group of people can reincarnate. Is it because, if she knows the truth, Qingshui's circle will be in a big mess? Tut, Suli naturally didn't know that the mirror spirit of reincarnation mirror was attached to the mirror frame and woke up. After returning to Ni sect, she didn't go to see Su Yuanhai and others who were taken good care of. Instead, she went directly to the forbidden land of the back mountain to practice in isolation. After being scolded, Black Lotus was a little dispirited. But, in order to make up for the non-existent debt, he simply passed on the secret refining method to Suli. In the addendum, Suli put a fragment in the middle of the lamp and carefully scratched the side of the lamp with her nails. The friction made a harsh sound, and at the same time, a special frequency was transmitted. The soul stone fragment that was originally lying quietly on the lamp immediately trembled and burst into sparks. Then, a dense white flame quickly sprang out from its surface. The white smoke shrouded the addendum. Suli immediately felt that the originally silent soul became active, and the normal flow of thinking suddenly accelerated. The doubts left in her heart instantly emerged in dozens of deduction directions. The effect is immediate. My thinking is much more active. Suli looked at the jumping flame on the lamp and put a pile of fragments next to the soul stone for it to burn. Then she slowly closed her eyes, and the secret method of soul tactics from the triangular copper coin appeared in her mind. Seeing this scene, Black Lotus sighed with an itch in his heart. Why didn't I treat this girl better before? Now I want to steal it, but I have no face. The mirror spirit, who was taking a nap in the space of reincarnation mirror, opened its eyes and muttered, "Idiot." It didn't dare to be as rampant as before. In the environment of the soul stone, Su Li's soul was very sensitive. If it was broken into pieces again, it would really die. Achoo! Black Lotus suddenly sneezed inexplicably. Who is scolding me? Those who know me should have died long ago. You are the one who should have died. Your whole family is dead. The mirror spirit forgot the danger of being discovered, and scolded loudly in the space. In the middle of scolding, it suddenly realized and sighed, the ghost clan was miserably schemed against. They died together with those things. Ghost Lotus's whole family is really dead. Tut, Black Lotus sneezed again and suddenly had a bad feeling. Is there really someone who is still alive like me? It's terrible. It said that I will be the dominator after 10,000 years. Old Bai, you don't keep your word. Chapter 413. The soul fire was still burning for 5 days and 5 nights. Half of the soul stone fragments Su Li brought back were gone. Black Lotus felt a pain in his heart. Just when he was about to lose control of his mind to rob, Su Li finally stopped and waved her hand to extinguish the soul lamp. Little Su Li, let's. Black Lotus rubbed his hands and was thinking of something nice to say. When he saw Su Li's dark eyes suddenly opened, he was shocked. At this moment, the originally dim adytum suddenly brightened for a moment. Black Lotus's mind was even more stagnant, and the rotating speed of the lotus pattern on the ring also slowed down. This girl's soul power has increased greatly. After the discomfort, Black Lotus looked at Su Li's eyes, which were getting brighter and deeper, and his expression was a bit broken. In addition to restoring the soul injury, the soul stone could only improve the power of understanding for a short time. How could it become the power of the soul for Su Li? It was not scientific. Black Lotus began to doubt his life again. Su Li did not notice his abnormality. After restraining her momentum, a touch of joy appeared in her eyes. The first level of the soul tactics is finally completed. The secret method of the soul is too difficult to practice. Su Li sighed, and Black Lotus couldn't help but roll his eyes. The secret method of the soul was different from the ordinary cultivation method. Generally speaking, only practitioners of Huashan realm who had materialized the soul could practice it. Below Huashan realm, the soul was just a hollow soul invisible to the naked eye. It was simply a fantasy to practice the secret method of the soul by relying on the hollow soul. Of course, there were geniuses who had materialized the soul before Huashan realm, and those talents could also practice the secret method of the soul. As for Su Li, who had forcibly practiced the secret method of the soul before materializing the soul, Black Lotus could only curl his lips and curse, extravagant. Half of the rare treasure used to restore the soul was wasted. Wasn't it extravagant? Su Li glanced at the depressed Black Lotus ring and didn't care about it. She opened the adytum door. Yen Zai, who was sitting and waiting outside the adytum, heard the movement and immediately opened his eyes. He rushed to the door and said respectfully, "Master." Su Li responded and looked at Yen Zai with a strange look. Yen Zai touched his face and asked in confusion, "Master, is there anything wrong?" Su Li shook her head, "Take me to Su Yuan Hai." Yen Zai immediately walked in front to lead the way, but he secretly thought about Su Li's strange look. Did he do something wrong to make Master angry? Staring at Yen Zai, who was meditating, Su Li increasingly felt that the brainwashing ability of Reincarnation Mirror was terrifying. Black Lotus, is your grade really above Reincarnation Mirror? Black Lotus flew into a rage when he heard this. Nonsense. I'm ranked in the top 3. That stupid donkey isn't even fit to carry my shoes. At his waist, the Reincarnation Mirror trembled slightly. Su Li seemed to be unaware of it and continued to say with interest, "How terrifying is the bewitching power of Reincarnation Mirror. I have met 2 people who entered the illusion of reincarnation that year, Dongfang Wuxue and Yen Zai. Even if they have awakened their real memories, they are still the ones in the Reincarnation Mirror. They betrayed the sect and were reviled by thousands of people, but they still feel that they are maintaining their original hearts. This idea will probably not change until they die. But you, Black Lotus." Black Lotus's face darkened, and he said stubbornly, "What's the big deal? Little Su Li, how can you compare me with Reincarnation Mirror in its heyday? Besides, reincarnation mirror is destroyed now. If that stupid donkey is still conscious, he is definitely more useless than me. I see. Suli smiled thoughtfully, and then changed the topic. Black Lotus, do you think there is any other secret method of soul that can achieve such bewitching effect except reincarnation mirror? Of course there is. Black Lotus blurted out without thinking, if the ability of reincarnation mirror is unique, the ranking of that stupid donkey will definitely be higher. It's a pity that there was a soul cultivation genius who created a secret method of soul called Tianxin. Although there are many restrictions in its use, its effect is not much different from that of reincarnation mirror. Suli suddenly understood and smiled without saying anything. Black Lotus suddenly thought of something, and his face changed slightly. Soul tactics. While they were talking, Yen Zai had taken Suli to the dungeon of Ni sect, which was specially used to lock up disciples who had made mistakes. Su Yuanhai's cultivation was sealed, and he was locked up in a cell alone. Although he was tortured a little these days, he was a talented person at that time. In just one day, his injuries had almost recovered. The only trouble was the seal set by Suli herself. Suli did not cover her trace when she came. Hearing the sound, Su Yuanhai immediately stopped breaking the seal and opened his eyes vigilantly. When he was about to pretend to be seriously injured and lie on the ground, he heard the girls chuckle, "Don't you think it's too late to pretend to be injured now?" Su Yuanhai froze and stopped. When he looked up and saw Suli who had walked to the front of the cell, his heart fell to the bottom. Even if he restarted his cultivation, he had no power to fight back in front of the Grand Elder of Ni sect. "Who are you?" After a moment of silence, Su Yuanhai couldn't help but ask. It was absolutely abnormal to know his past. Few people in the Su family knew what happened to him in his childhood, let alone an outsider who had never been in contact with him before. Su Li's eyes flashed. She had a vague memory about Su Yuanhai in her childhood. But judging from Su Yuanhai's reaction, it was obvious that something happened between them in their childhood. "Now, I will give you two choices." Ignoring Su Yuanhai's words, Suli said lightly, "I don't want to repeat the first choice. Do you agree or not? You know, this is your last chance, and time is running out." As soon as she said this, the cell suddenly became silent. Su Yuanhai felt bitter in his heart. He didn't want to die, but if he really betrayed the Su family, his end was likely to be more miserable than death. "What's the second choice?" Su Yuanhai took a breath and asked weakly. Suli raised her eyebrows. "So, you refuse me?" Su Yuanhai was silent and couldn't answer. "I'll take it as your acquiescence." Su Li's eyes became indifferent, and she raised her hand to hit him casually. Su Yuanhai couldn't dodge and was hit in the chest. He was blown out like a cannonball and hung on the wall of the dungeon for a long time before slowly sliding down. "Whoa!" Su Yuanhai spat out a mouthful of blood. He only felt severe pain all over his body, as if his bones were broken. But what he was thinking now was not the pain, but why Suli only seriously injured him instead of killing him directly. Su Yuanhai had no time to think more. His head was dizzy, and he was hit out again. Continuous screams reverberated in the dungeon. Yen Zai, who was guarding outside the door, immediately set up a soundproof matrix. He remembered that Suli had told him not to let the noise go out. After a while, the whole dungeon became bumpy, and the walls were full of human-shaped holes and blood stains. Su Yuanhai's eyes were dull, and he lay on the ground like a pile of rotten meat. He was dying, and his mouth overflowed with dark red blood with pieces of internal organs. "Kill me," a faint voice came into Su Li's ears. Su Li's white clothes were not stained with blood. She squatted down and poked the deepest wound on Su Yuanhai's chest. There was no response. It seems to be enough. If I continue, I will kill him, and the loss outweighs the gain. Murmuring, Su Li slightly opened her 5 fingers and covered the top of Su Yuanhai's head. She activated the soul tactics, and immediately 5 transparent threads shot out from her fingertips and penetrated into Su Yuanhai's skull without any hindrance. The method of 5 thread soul control. In the space of the ring, Black Lotus recognized Su Li's action. His eyes widened, and he couldn't help cursing, "Damn it. Which old bastard had nothing better to do?" How was this soul tactics? This was clearly the heart of heaven. What kind of monster is she to learn the secret method of soul control in 5 days? It turns out to be the will of heaven. In the reincarnation mirror, the pupils of the phantom of the little beast shrank, and it was full of confusion and helplessness at this moment. What should I do? I offended her too much in the last life. If she knows that I have regained consciousness now. The phantom of the little beast couldn't help shivering, but he didn't notice that Su Li, who was concentrating on operating the method of soul control, suddenly turned her eyes and inadvertently glanced at her waist. Half a day later, Su Li's right hand left Su Yuanhai's head, and her face was slightly pale. Guards, swish. Before Su Li finished her words, Yan Zai appeared in front of the cell. He glanced at Su Yuanhai, who was lying on the ground, and said respectfully, "Zai is here." Su Li rubbed her eyebrows and said tiredly, "Take him to the guest room and cure him." Ah. What? Yan Zai was stunned and touched his head. Wasn't Su Yuanhai their enemy? Why did Master suddenly find his conscience after beating him half to death? Despite his doubts, Yan Zai didn't ask more and left the cell with Su Yuanhai. The elders of Su family on the other side of the cell still didn't know what happened. "Master, did you succeed?" Black Lotus asked cautiously. Su Li glanced at Black Lotus' ring. "How do I know?" Black Lotus choked, but he didn't get angry. He said with an embarrassed smile, "That's true. It's the first time for you to try the secret method. But, if Su Yuanhai is turned into an idiot by you, then kill him. He is just a Yuanying realm cultivator. Don't feel bad." Su Li said casually. Black Lotus couldn't help but tremble in his heart. He said with a hollow smile, "Master, I didn't mean that. Su Yuanhai and you seem to, I don't have the childhood memory. Don't be soft-hearted." Black Lotus was stunned. It shouldn't be. When your life ring was broken in the reincarnation mirror, you should have retrieved all your memories. Even if someone erased your memories, it doesn't matter. Why? Black Lotus didn't finish his words, but his expression suddenly changed and he didn't continue. Su Li was thoughtful, but she didn't ask more. She changed the topic and asked, "What about the swordsmanship?" Ah. The topic seemed to change too much. Black Lotus didn't remember it for a while and was at a loss. "You said that you would give me a swordsmanship of Numa and blood school. Did you forget it?" Su Li's tone was light, but there was contempt in her eyes. Black Lotus remembered her previous doubts and was indignant. "My level is really higher than the reincarnation mirror." Chapter 4:14. Remember in 1 second. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Paw. A dim light flashed on the surface of Black Lotus' ring, and a jade slip that had just been inscribed was thrown out by Black Lotus. When Su Li took it, she heard Black Lotus's proud voice sounded, "I used to be the treasure of our clan. How can a bumpkin-like reincarnation mirror compare with me in terms of the practice method reserve in my memory? That stupid ass can't catch up with me." After blowing his own trumpet, Black Lotus finally felt that he had regained his dignity. He continued, "This is a cultivation plan that I've tailor-made for you. However, even a monster like you has limited energy. You must know when to give up. Suli nodded. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I understand. After roughly glancing at the profound secret method in the jade slip, Suli raised her head and pondered for a moment. She suddenly asked, how much can you recover with 100 pieces of soul stone? Black Lotus was stunned for a moment, and then he realized what Suli meant. His eyes suddenly lit up. I was seriously injured 10,000 years ago, and now my spiritual body is only equivalent to a mortal soul. If you give me the remaining soul stones, I don't have to worry about falling into a deep sleep again. Get to the point. Suli frowned. Black Lotus was speechless for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, if your cultivation is higher, I can take you to a place where your talent of Ghost Clan can be improved quickly. Your weak body of Evil Ghost can be restored to normal within a year. Activate the true talent of the body of an evil ghost. Suli raised her eyebrows and didn't speak. It seemed that she was trying to figure out the truth of Black Lotus's words. Black Lotus finally saw a glimmer of hope. He immediately panicked. Everything I said is true. Why would I lie to you? Then I'll trust you this once. Suli was silent for a while, and suddenly said, throwing the bag containing the soul stone fragments into Black Lotus' ring. Black Lotus was overjoyed at once. At the same time, he wondered why Suli became so easy to talk to this time. Was it because he gave her the jade slip? Soon, Black Lotus realized that he was overthinking. Black Lotus, you have to recover well. If you can't bring me to that place, I'll use the divine water lightning to beat you back to your original state. I'll just lose some soul stones anyway. I can afford it. Black Lotus's face darkened. It knew that it was not easy to take Suli's things. Damn it, this is a huge loss. I hope that place hasn't been discovered by the human race. Sigh. With a sigh, Black Lotus' ring fell silent. His soul power was too weak now, and it would take a long time to absorb the soul stone. Suli glanced at the empty ring finger and stared at the air for a while. Finally, she turned her attention back to the jade slip. Glancing around, Suli couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Although Black Lotus liked to brag, there was one thing he was right about. Any of the secret methods stored in the Black Lotus ring would definitely cause a bloody storm. Body tempering swordsmanship of the Qi and Blood School, Tsuishing. Qi and Blood Sect, Fist Art, Moon Freezing Fist. Qi and Blood Sect Saint Grade Close Range Movement Art, Indefinite Step. Wind Style Movement Art, Flowing Wind. Black Lotus gave out 4 cultivation methods at once, and all of them were the works of the top sects of cultivation in ancient times. Suli carefully studied the first, Tsuishing, and soon immersed herself in it. In addition to the cultivation method itself, the jade slip contained more personal insights written by Black Lotus himself, which made it easier for Suli to understand. Having been with Black Lotus for a long time, Suli was not completely unfamiliar with the common sense of the ancient cultivation era. Practitioners, no matter in the present or ancient times, could be divided into 3 categories. The first was the practice of law, the second was the practice of soul, and the third was the practice of body. Therefore, when the ancient cultivation era was full of sects, there were 3 corresponding schools that were extremely prosperous. The practice of law was collectively called the School of Heaven and Earth, the practice of soul was collectively called the School of Soul, the practice of body was collectively called the School of Qi and Blood. Among them, there were many special schools and small schools with numerous and messy names, which couldn't be counted by reason. The School of Qi and Blood was the way of the practice of body to become a sage. This kind of practitioners were all coarse and thick-skinned, with great strength and extremely strong survival ability. They could kill a practitioner of law at the same level with one punch, which was extremely terrifying. But it also had a flaw, that was, it couldn't fight with the enemy from a distance. If a practitioner of law in the top school of law could practice a magic method, the power of heaven and earth would be far more powerful than that of the physical body. As long as the practitioner was not entangled, he could completely exhaust the practitioner of law to death. But in general, the practitioners of the school of Qi and blood had a strong physical body and a stronger survival ability. Among the three schools in the ancient times, the practitioners and forces of the school of Qi and blood were the strongest. Of course, some special schools were not included, such as Chuangxing Path. My physical body is extremely strong, so it will take twice the effort to practice Cuixing with half the result. It's the best way to improve my combat ability in a short time. Su Li smiled slightly. Black Lotus is quite well prepared. He even has the body movement and the close-range boxing. The body movement, Lu Feng, was the best choice for chasing or escaping. The fierce boxing, coupled with the advantage of the physical body, would not be too weak. With a weapon in hand, the longer it was, the stronger it was. The swordsmanship was naturally better than the boxing, but no one could guarantee that he would always have a good sword in his hand. If he only knew the swordsmanship, he would be at the mercy of others if he lost his sword. However, I am different. I am not a simple practitioner of law. Even if I lost my sword, I still have many means to use. I can put the boxing aside and practice Cuixing first, and then Lu Feng. After sorting out her thoughts, Su Li did not delay and began to comprehend Cuixing. She was good at using a sword in her previous life, and her foundation of swordsmanship was not weak, not to mention her physical body. Therefore, although Cuixing was a school of swordsmanship, it was not as difficult to understand as she imagined. Soon, the first hurdle of Cuixing was no secret in Su Li's eyes. She took out an ordinary long sword from the universe ring, sealed her cultivation, and began to practice in the adytum. But after a short while, Su Li stopped and frowned. This adytum was only used for meditation and breathing. It was too narrow for practicing swordsmanship. Well, let's go to the back mountain. Su Li took the sword and went out. Hua Yan was the only one living in the back mountain, so she easily found a quiet open space. The first move. Su Li's gentle pneuma suddenly became sharp when she put out the sword momentum. Then she took a deep breath and slowly waved the long sword. The blade left a faint trace in the void. The sword was chopped out softly and powerlessly, only bringing a breeze. I failed. Su Li didn't care and continued to familiarize herself with the moves. Cultivation was never achieved overnight. No matter how good her foundation was, she still needed time to practice. Time passed unconsciously. 3 days later, Su Yuanhai woke up. Yan Zai immediately came to inform him, but he didn't find Su Li. After asking Hua Yan, he followed the directions and found Su Li, who was practicing swordsmanship in the forest. He couldn't help but feel strange when he saw the swordsmanship in Su Li's hands. It was so soft that she couldn't even chop a willow twig. What kind of swordsmanship did she practice? At this time, Su Li stopped and asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" Yan Zai immediately came to himself and saluted, "Master." Su Yuanhai woke up, and he became a little strange. Strange? Su Li inserted the long sword into the ground and brushed off the fallen leaves on her white clothes. Then she turned around and walked away. "Come with me." Yan Zai glanced at the long sword and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he didn't say anything and led the way silently. 15 minutes later, in the guest room of Ni sect. Su Yuanhai was immediately excited when he saw Su Li. He knelt in front of Su Li regardless of his injury. "I will never forget Master's life-saving grace." This sudden scene instantly caused Yan Zai to be dumbstruck with shock. Life-saving grace. You were almost killed by Master. How come Master became your life-saving grace when you woke up? Could it be that his brain was damaged from the beating? Yen Zai looked up and down. Seeing Su Yuanhai's clear eyes, he felt a chill on his back. What did Master do to Su Yuanhai? Su Li lifted Su Yuanhai, who was grateful with her lips curled up. Her eyes were shining. The method of soul control was successful. Although Su Yuanhai still remembered everything he had experienced since childhood, his fundamental belief had completely changed into unconditional loyalty to Su Li. How do you feel now? Su Li asked lightly. Su Yuanhai felt flattered and quickly knelt down and said, "Thank you for your concern, Master. My injury is fine and I will definitely recover in half a month. I am willing to go through fire and water for Master without any hesitation." Yen Zai felt a toothache. Why did these words sound so familiar? Did Su Yuanhai learn from him? Zai, you go out first. Su Li looked at Su Yuanhai, who knelt on the ground, and ordered him with her eyes flashing. Soon, there were only Su Li and Su Yuanhai in the guest room. Su Li sat down and poured herself a cup of tea slowly. She said softly, "Raise your head. I have something to ask you." Su Yuanhai obediently knelt straight and looked at Su Li with a loyal face. "Go ahead, Master. Tell me everything about Su Li's childhood, no matter how big or small." Su Li took a sip of tea and looked at Su Yuanhai. The latter immediately felt a burning feeling. "Do you know Su Li, Master?" Su Yuanhai's expression kept changing, but he didn't show signs of breaking down like last time. His soul was controlled. Although he remembered everything and his thinking was as smooth as usual, the mental barrier in his heart was gone. Su Li didn't answer and just sipped the tea quietly. Su Yuanhai suddenly felt the pressure and quickly replied, "Master, Su Li used to live in the same yard with me when she was a child, but I don't know her very well. Although Su Li was born by a servant of the Su family, she attracted a lot of attention. I am still puzzled about the specific reason. I remember that my father once told me not to get too close to Su Li. But I was young at that time and didn't listen to him. Soon I got familiar with Su Li." Speaking of this, Su Yuanhai gradually fell into the memory and laughed. "I still remember that Su Li was very beautiful when she smiled. She followed me and called me brother. We were very close. It was the first time that someone called me brother. That feeling was wonderful. I swore to her at that time that I would protect her for a lifetime." Su Li listened with her face propped up and her eyes slightly narrowed. She called Su Yuanhai brother. Why didn't she remember it at all? You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.